we on? Right, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our May 14th Indian River Lagoon Council Board of Directors meeting. We are going to call the meeting to order this morning, and we will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance, if you'll please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, I would love to have our council members introduce themselves, and we'll start this morning with Jackie Thurlow-Lippisch.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Jackie Thurlow-Lippisch, South Florida Water Management District. Great to be here today.
Good morning. I'm Chris Zadowski, San Luis County Commissioner and President Board Chair.
Good morning. I'm Aaron Watkins, representing the Florida Department of Environmental Protection. I'm the Central District Director.
Good morning. I'm Stacy Hetherington from Martin County, also the current board chair.
Good morning. Susan Adams, Indian River County Commissioner.
Good morning. I'm Jeff Brower, Volusia County Chair.
Good morning. Kurt Smith, Brevard County.
Doug Borney, St. Johns River Water Management District.
Great. And would staff like to introduce themselves?
Why not? Dwayne DeFries, Executive Director of the National Estuary Program in the Council. Dan?
Daniel Kolodny, Chief Operating Officer, Indian River Lagoon National Estuary Program and NIRL Council.
And good morning, Glenn Tercivia, Council's Attorney.
Okay.
Kathy Hill, Communications Director.
Stephanie Jackson, Administrative Coordinator.
Good. Well, welcome, everyone. And with that, we'll move on to agenda revisions. Does anyone have any changes or revisions to the agenda?
Madam Chair, I'd be happy to move the agenda as presented.
Okay. Very good. So we have a motion on the floor by Commissioner Adams.
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Smith. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. And this morning, we have a special treat. We get to honor some of our former chairs here from the Indian River Lagoon Council. And I am relatively new to this body, and I will say that from the moment that I stepped on this board, there was nothing but welcoming. And a couple of these chairs I know that have in fact been somewhat mentors as county commissioner leaders and helped with other issues. So our first recognition, and when we present, we're going to go down at the very end and take a photo. So our first recognition is Miss Susan Adams, who served us as our chair for 2020. And Susan, would you like to say a few words?
Thank you. Yeah, it's been my pleasure to be chair of this wonderful group. All the exciting work that we do throughout the year. You know, I feel like it's always been a team effort between the members and staff and the community and the science community and the citizens community. It's been a pleasure. So thank you for allowing me to lead the group for a year, and I'm glad we are in good stands with Ms. Hetherington.
Good. Well, we appreciate your leadership, and we're going to present this beautiful gavel to you.
Oh, that's so
Yes.
cool. That's awesome.
With the oyster bed, and we will be taking a picture in just a moment downstairs.
I love that.
I would also like to recognize our 2019 chair, Deb Denny's. She unfortunately is not here today, but served us very well. And Dr. DeFries, you're going to present Ms. Denny's with her recognition,
Yes,
correct?
I'd be happy to. And just a disclosure, only a half a dozen oysters were killed for each of those awards.
Okay, and now we have Mr. Kurt Smith, a long overdue recognition, and we're happy to have you back here for his first term of service and being chair in 2017. Okay. Mr. Smith, would you like to say a few words?
No.
He's a politician, give him an hour.
Yeah.
You know what they say about giving a,
Join us downstairs.
you know what they say about giving a politician a microphone? That's a bad thing to do. Oh, very good, thank you. I'm kind of jealous though. I want one
Why
of
don't
those.
you all join us downstairs?
I want one of
Like
those.
this picture.
It says Susan.
Where would you like this?
Right over here.
You're coming back on a chair cycle, so we're gonna make you stick around for the next award.
He's the one who actually gave us the gavel idea. Yeah, that's terrific.
Everybody there?
Okay, so.
Can I take my shoes off?
All right, thanks.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
Well, thank you, and again, we appreciate your leadership. And we are going to move on this morning to public comment. If you would like to make a public comment, then please fill out a speaker form. And I have, at the moment, one public comment form, and that will be Miss Laura Lee Thompson.
Good morning.
Good morning.
550 Irwin Avenue in Mims. And I wanted to talk to you today about shoreline habitat and the importance of preserving sandy beaches and that type of habitat for the horseshoe crabs and the shorebirds and the different animals that need that, that area to be able to feed and nest. And I think, we've done a lot with oyster restoration and replanting mangroves, but mangroves don't make sandy beaches. So it's really critical as we move forward and with your restoration plan that you keep in mind that we need these habitats for beach nesting birds, horseshoe crabs. I'm from the northern end of the lagoon, and so we're blessed with a lot of undeveloped shoreline up there because of the Merritt Island Wildlife Refuge. There's 140 miles of dikes along the estuary shoreline up there. However, those dikes, due to the water level rising, they're under siege. Every time we even lost dikes last year during the king tides, during some northeasters during the king tides. And every time they patch those dikes, they're armoring them with rocks. So we're very, very slowly losing that very critical habitat between that those animals need. So it's not going to be a wildlife refuge for shorebirds and horseshoe crabs anymore. It's just going to be another place where seagrass won't grow because it's next to rocks. So as we are looking at the causeways and upgrading the causeways, we need to be right there in the forefront, encouraging them to keep that habitat, or in most cases, they're going to have to put it back because the causeways are mostly rocks now. But the causeways are really important for nesting horseshoe crabs and shorebirds and people. The causeways are the window to the lagoon for the people that live here and our visitors. And so, I can't take my kayak and go into somebody's backyard and launch it to go into the river. I use the causeways and places like that. So as we grow, we need to really keep in mind that we need to keep these places available for the people. You can't launch a windsurfer or a kiteboard from the top of a rock on the causeway, and that's the best places for those type of activities is the causeways. So we need to ensure that the public keeps their recreational areas and that the animals still have a place to nest. Because of all the houses, their hard armor and their shorelines, we continue to lose that type of habitat the causeways are pretty much some of the only places that are going to be left for that type of habitat. And then, as we lose this habitat, we need to be thinking about how to put it back and make it better. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
if I could just comment, I'd like to invite you to Fort Pierce. We have Jim Oppenborn as our artificial reef expert in the county. And we have been developing oyster bed restoration projects along Indian River Drive, along the lagoon. And what we've found in that process, not only has the beach accreted some 450 feet, we've included new seagrasses, wading birds are just very prolific, and the horseshoe crabs have all gathered there. So now it's a nesting spot. And so I'd like to share that with you if you get in contact with my office, and we'll have a trip out there and show you what's happening there. And maybe future projects can be reviewed. Any of the nonprofits that are out there, take a look at what's happening and emulate that process so that that can happen along our waterways, shoreways.
I would love to do that, sir. And you have a lovely beach along your causeway there that I've been flashing pictures of on a regular basis of this is what we need. I think it's the North Causeway Park.
There's several. We have
Yeah.
one in
Now,
South
did
Beach,
you
too.
did you do sand renourishment there, or was that sand there when you
That
built
sand
it?
was there. The sand renourishment's out at the jetty. That's the only
Okay.
place we nourish, yeah.
Okay. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
You've done a really good job there.
Thank you.
And your marina too, with the breakwaters that you built at the marina. Fantastic.
We're getting there. Thank you.
Chair, may
Thank
I
you.
briefly say something?
Yes, go ahead.
I just wanted to thank you so much for your comments and for your longstanding support of our wildlife and the beauty and recreation of the Indian River Lagoon. And absolutely, we have a responsibility to the animals and to allow people to recreate. And we have to figure it out. And if we're going to cover everything up with rocks, we're going to have to create another area somewhere else for the critters and people to enjoy. Because if we're not able to be part of it, you can't love it and protect it. And we have to help the little critters.
Yeah, and I might say the same to you. Thank you,
Aw,
Jackie.
thank you. So good to
I
see
love your
you.
blogs.
Thanks.
Appreciate your support at the birding festival.
You're the,
And,
you're
well,
an
we need to keep
institution.
spoil islands in mind too, guys. Spoil islands are critical for habitat and recreation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson. Okay, we are seeing no other members of the public wishing to comment. We are going to move on to our water quality reports. And our first water quality report of the Northern and Central Lagoon will be Dr. Chuck Jacoby. Good morning.
Okay. Oh, here we go. Okay, so yeah, a brief update on conditions since February when we last met. Again, focusing in on the data that come in what we term continuously, like 15-minute intervals from these 6 stations in the lagoon, where there are these recorders that track various parameters of water quality and telemetry that into the district. Oops, yeah. So the first one here is salinity. And what you may notice is that the Vero Beach, the gray line, and Mosquito Lagoon, that sort of yellow-orange line, those salinities are the highest. So the two ends of the lagoon, in a sense, the two ends of the district's part of the lagoon, in a sense. Vero Beach, influenced by the inlets. Mosquito Lagoon, probably influenced mainly by evaporation. And then in the middle is the Titusville location, which is on the fishing pier. And the 3 lower salinities are at O'Galley, Cocoa, and in Banana River Lagoon, which again is an influence of the fresh water and the rains we've had. One of the things about these that is potentially important is that they're not as extreme as we've seen in some of the past years. So in some years we had very high salinities, far above 35, which is typical seawater. And then in other years we've had very low salinities due to rainfall. So these are, kind of typical, I guess you'd call it. Temperatures are on the rise. So they've gone, since we last met, from a low of about 61 degrees Fahrenheit to up to around 82 now in almost all the places in the lagoon. So summer's on its way, and we'll see what that brings. Thus far, chlorophyll levels in the recent past have been relatively low. So once Titusville sort of settled down, there have been some blips, as it were, in Mosquito Lagoon, in combination with some turbidity because of the winds that disturb the sediments. It's a very shallow shelf there. But in general, the chlorophyll values have been relatively low, so the water is relatively clear. This satellite image, these are two of the best satellite images that I could come up with in that time interval. Clouds and what we call glint, which is the sun bouncing off the water and getting into the satellite imager, causing it to kind of gray out the whole lagoon. These two show you that back on the 27th of February, inside that red circle, the water looks kind of greenish. These are sort of try to mimic true color, what you would see with your eye. But you can see it gets clearer in both Mosquito Lagoon and Northern Indian River Lagoon as you move into March. So conditions have cleared. That translates into the fact that we've had little to no issues with dissolved oxygen at any of the stations throughout the district's part of the lagoon. So they're all above that sort of 2 milligrams per liter, that tan bar at the bottom, which is when fish and other aquatic life starts to get stressed. So we're doing well. These are some images from a flight that was done by Mote Marine Lab out counting manatees. And I show you them partly just to illustrate the fact that the water is relatively clear in both of these places, which are different parts of the lagoon. And also to point out that that dark material that you see on the bottom, pretty extensive, that's probably Caulerpa, which is a macroalgae. It's not seagrass. It's a large algae that grows on the bottom, actually has connections that keep it on the bottom. Our transects, which are coming up on our accuracy assessment for the mapping that we're doing, because this is a mapping year, will confirm that this is Caulerpa. So, but you can see the water is relatively clear. We also still continue our every other week meetings, online meetings, to discuss conditions in the lagoon, to make sure that all of the players have the best available information at this time, and to raise any issues and seek solutions. And I'm happy to answer questions if you have some.
Great. Does anybody have any questions?
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Chuck, Caulerpa is for me, I'm a novice, I'm not a scientist. It's kind of a strange duck because it does grow in the sand, but it obviously is not seagrass. It doesn't create what seagrasses do. But do the manatees eat this? I would suspect that they do.
The manatees will, we believe, eat it. Whether it gives them good nutrition or not is a question, and the taste may be a question. So Caulerpa species in general, this genus of algae, tends to produce a lot of what are called secondary metabolites. So as it grows and so forth, it produces these compounds that deter grazing. They taste bad, as it were. And so the question is, what do manatees think of that? Do they like spicy food or not? So manatees will eat it. It probably doesn't have the substance that they're used to getting from seagrasses. Seagrasses have a little bit more, sort of usable material in them. But it's possible that they will eat it for sure.
Well, as in the Northern Lagoon, anyway, there's so little seagrass, the manatees are eating anything. I see them out on my rocks trying to climb the rocks to eat the algae off the rocks. That's how sad that's gotten to be.
Yes.
So I'm guessing that they're going to eat anything that's green, tastes bad or not.
Yes, I'm guessing they are too. And they have seen Caulerpa in the guts of some of the manatees that they've done necropsies on. So.
Great. Anyone else? Jackie?
Dr. Jacoby, hi.
Hi.
Can you please go back to your slide of the circle and the algae bloom?
Oops.
Okay.
This one?
Yes, thank you. So the first date is 2/27.
Yes, ma'am.
And what was the second date?
3/14.
3/14. So Can you just tell me a little bit about the blooms? What do you think, where are they in their maturity? Do they go away the way that some of the cyanobacteria does, like it gets thicker and then it kind of falls to the bottom? Or what's the projection on this area?
So the bloom that was underway on the 27th, that's the tail end of the bloom that we had that started around Thanksgiving 2020 and ran for that span of time and then faded away. We are now getting reports of blooms of pyrodinium, which is the dinoflagellate that produces the bioluminescence that kayakers love to go through at night, as well as diatom, particularly Pseudonychia. So once again, as water warms up, these kinds of blooms were things that we had seen in the past. So pretty much each early summer, you'd see a pyrodinium bloom. You may see a diatom bloom, but these larger phytoplankton don't tend to produce the kinds of blooms that last as long or get as intense. The chlorophyll values, concentrations don't get as high. It's the smaller phytoplankton that we've seen in some of our longer lasting blooms that seem to cause us the most challenges.
So there's not a health issue with those as far as the aerosol?
So both of those, pyrodinium and Pseudonychia, do produce toxins, but they're not aerosolized typically. They're more things that you pick up through eating shellfish that are contaminated with toxins.
Right.
But much like the cyanobacteria, just the fact that they're there, and even they're in large numbers, does not necessarily mean that there's toxin there. They don't produce toxin all the time. And so identifying the toxin is, something you have to do at a given moment.
Right, and I'm sure you don't want me to ask you this question, but I'm not sure if somebody else is going to speak on it later. There's been so much in the press, and Kurt also asked about it. What can we expect with the manatees? And I had read that they might move them to another place, some of them. Is that realistic? It's a huge thing. And the kids held a rally on the bridge, the river kids, for the manatees, and it's great to see the young people speaking out. But it seems so bleak. I was just hoping you could give me some hope.
So, I would defer for details to my FWC colleagues, because they're the ones that are basically managing this. But I have been in several meetings with both the state Fish and Wildlife and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife, where they're saying, okay, this is the situation, what are we going to do about it? And, the answers are not simple. This is not a situation that they've faced before, and so they're working on what is the best response. Do we try to move manatees? They do pick up manatees that are struggling, and they take them to rehabilitate them, but those facilities are starting to fill up. And so then, do you feed the manatees? Do you bring in food to help them tide over this coming season? And that's a question that's under active debate at this point. So the problem is recognized. The solution is something that we're pursuing.
Right. Well, thank you so much for talking about it. It's important.
Thank you, Dr. Jacoby. And our next water quality report will be by St. Lucie County, Jose Vega.
How do I get it on the screen? Okay.
Could we have the slide, please?
Good morning, council members. I am Brandon Freeman with St. Lucie County. This is this quarter's rainfall data. These are the estimated total nitrogen and phosphorus load calculations for the C23, C24, and 10 Mile Creek. The rainflow data comes from South Florida Water Management District DV Hydro database. The rainfall data used in this spreadsheet comes from TMCWX located in 10 Mile Creek, which is reported in daily average for the time period reported. The flow monitoring stations for S48S, for the C23 basin, S49S, for the C24, and Gordy S for 10 Mile Creek. The monitoring station at Gordy S was down for much of the quarter, so these numbers are an underestimate. The total nitrogen and total phosphorus concentrations are based on DEP's WASH model. Rainfall for this quarter was 0.84 inches above average in the basins, and total nitrogen was 22.3 tons, while total phosphorus was roughly 4.24 tons. St. Lucie County has been working for the past year with Tetra Tech to create a water quality needs assessment that is now finished. The goal of the assessment was to come up with conceptual projects that would improve water quality for St. Lucie County and the IRL, for the St. Lucie River and the IRL. These projects will complement our neighborhood improvement projects as well as other worthwhile projects that we find. These numbers reiterate how important those IRL south northern components are to the health of the Indian River Lagoon.
That's great.
Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And our next water quality report on the Southern Lagoon is Diane Hughes from Martin County. It's great to see you, Diane.
Okay. Greetings. Oh, one more. You all know who I am. I'm Diane Hughes, work for Martin County. Okay, so this is just yesterday's level of Lake Okeechobee, 13.65 feet. You can see that to the east, we're getting no discharges into our estuary. And to the west, they're getting almost 2,000 CFS. We're not making good friends on the West Coast right now because we're getting zero and they're getting all the impact. In the beginning of this process with doing the Lake Okeechobee operating manual, they have never worried about getting more discharges because they have an MFL and a restoration flow that they want to get. But during this process, they're getting a little bit upset with the East Coast. So we're trying to work on that and get that better. This level in Lake Okeechobee is 2.5 feet higher right now than it's been in the last 2 years. So we're a little bit concerned about the kind of discharges we may be getting in the future. And also right now, there's a major algae bloom almost covering the entire lake right now. So we're a little bit nervous, and so is Caloosahatchee. These are the middle estuary salinity levels. You can see they vary from about 5 to 25. If you look at the April 10th, April 9th is when they stopped discharging to us, so you can see how our salinity levels are going up in the estuary. We're pretty good with that, middle estuary. Also, you can see here, I got this from about April 12th up to May, and you can see that at the 12th, they stopped the discharges on April 9th, 10th, that the Enterococcus levels were still a little bit bad, but now that we're getting no discharges, it's starting to look pretty good. Now, Roosevelt Bridge, Sam Sprit, Layton Park are in the middle estuary area. Sand Sprit Park and the Stewart Sandbar are closer to the inlet areas. And then you could see at the top, those are actually the two top, Jensen Beach Causeway and Stewart Causeway, are in the Indian River Lagoon. So things are looking good there as well for Enterococcus levels. So we've had some field staff that are out in the watershed every day. They are saying it looks really nice and clear in the Indian River Lagoon and in the South Fork of the St. Lucie River. They're starting to see seagrasses on the sandbar, so we're a little bit excited about that. And they're seeing bait fish again, and they haven't seen that in a while, so field staff's getting pretty excited, probably getting ready to go fishing again. And then this is I told you about the lake being 2.5 feet higher in the halves, and we're just really worried that we might have discharges coming to us, which will then impact the southern Indian River Lagoon, because they go all the way out. And it also impacts our coral reef as it goes out the inlet and goes to the south. So that's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane. Does anybody have any questions
No
for
questions.
Diane? Okay.
Thanks.
Appreciate it. Now we are going to do our management conference committee reports, and we will start with the management board report. Kathy LaMartina.
Good morning. Kathy LaMartina, Chair of the Management Board. So our meeting was held on May 11th, and to start off, there were 2 requests for agenda revisions. There was a request to discuss hiring a chief scientist for the IRL NEP staff, and there was a request to discuss putting out an RFP for legal counsel services. These items were added to the agenda and discussed, but neither resulted in a recommendation to the board. The financial subcommittee report was heard and approved by the management board, and the amendment to service contract with Integrity Arts and Technology was approved unanimously by the management board, which will enable staff to have more flexibility with the contractor without an increase in cost. The following were also unanimously approved for recommendation to the board. It's recommended that staff develop and advertise a competitive RFP for independent audit services. It's recommended that the FY 2022 final budget is adopted. It's recommended that the EPA work plan modification to relocate funds is allowed by EPA in response to the COVID pandemic and put towards hazardous algal bloom monitoring. It's recommended to accept the final ranked list of proposals for the 2021 Small Grants Program and authorize staff to negotiate and enter into contracts with the awarded applicants. And it's also recommended that for staff to develop and submit a letter of intent in response to the EPA RFP for Restore America's Estuaries Coastal Watersheds Grant Program. So I don't want to ruin the surprise for you, but the management board was also extremely impressed with the videos that you will see shortly. So I just want to say that to you. And then the meeting was adjourned around 12:30 p.m. So that's it. If you have any questions.
Great report. Thanks, Kathy. Anybody have any questions for Kathy? All right, thank you. Moving on to the STEM Advisory Committee, and that will be presented by Dr. Chuck Jacoby.
Good morning again. Chuck Jacoby, St. John's River Water Management District, and the STEM AC likewise met on the 11th. A fair bit of our time was spent listening to report from the FIT Improving Restoring Inflow project. There were a lot of questions and so forth that we're going to gather up and send to them and get responses back, but the presentation was well received and very valuable. We did recommend that the budget for FY 2022 be adopted, and we did support the concept of putting a letter of intent into the Restore America's Estuaries call for proposals regarding updating the economic analysis for the lagoon. And we discussed the causeway issue that you had just heard about.
Great. Anybody have any questions? Doug.
You've never termed it that way before, Doug.
I have been fortunate to see you operate in both of those arenas. Can you hear me okay?
Turn it to green.
Okay. I've been lucky enough to operate in both those arenas and see you perform and to provide an invaluable service to the St. John's District and to this council. And this isn't the most appropriate time, but I keep wanting to say thank you. You've been invaluable to me as a governing board member of St. John's and here. Your service, you've always have the best information. It's first class. This council, in my opinion, is much better to have you with us. And your passion is obvious to save this lagoon, and it makes serving on this council really cool to have staff like you serving with us. So I just wanted to say thank you.
Well, thank you. And I'll have to say that it's always enjoyable to come here and get grilled. So
That comes with the territory.
Yes.
It does. If you're going to stand up, you better be willing to take it.
Great. Thank you so much.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
It's funny, Doug stole my thunder because I was going to wait for these reports, but I wanted to do it now in light of the conversation that Jackie was having with Chuck. You don't see what he does, and actually Kathy LaMartino, our support from the two water management districts is significant, and we couldn't do the work that we do without that support. But Chuck in particular, when he goes quickly through that slide about these bi-weekly harmful algal bloom meetings, you know, they were weekly for months. He is coordinating kind of the ship, and we're kind of hosting the Zoom. But he's also, thankfully, because of the EPA supplemental grant a couple years ago on the on the harmful algal blooms, Chuck is convening all of the scientists that were part of the 2011 consortia on the super bloom, and we are in the NEP and council supporting publication of that work in peer review. So he's serving as kind of the sheep herder to the editors for that journal. You know, he's also doing all the water quality. He's, you know, teaming up on this contract that you're going to see here later. And so, you know, I kind of look at Chuck as he is our staff scientist. And then we have this deep pool within our Science Advisory Committee. But I too want to thank you for being there. Anytime we need help, we turn to the water management districts, and both are always there. So, Chuck, appreciate the hard work, because we utilize his time probably even more than we should at times. But appreciate it.
No problem.
Thank you. I concur. Thank you, Chuck. Okay, moving on to agenda item number 8, the 2020 independent audit, and that will be presented by Dan Kolodny.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
We got one more report, and that's the Citizens Advisory
Oh, did
Committee.
I skip over that one? I'm sorry, Kathy. Okay, we have a Citizens Advisory Committee. All of those flowery words about Dr. Jacoby sent me right to the next item.
Yeah, I don't know how to
So,
follow that, so. So Citizens Advisory Committee met last week. They approved and recommend that you fund the small grants that you're going to see a little bit later. And you have in your packages sort of a synopsis of all of those projects. They also discussed some of the scoring that they're not happy with, so they're going to revise scoring for next time in those proposals and make it a little more specific. So that was one of the things. They recommend that you approve the budget and the contract with Ideas and the EPA, moving those EPA funds. And that was it. It was a fairly short meeting and very routine, so.
Okay, good. Does anybody have any questions for Kathy? No? Seeing none, thank you, Kathy. Okay, now we will move on to agenda item number 8, 2020 independent audit. Dan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As you have on your desk there is a package for the fiscal year 2020 audit. And to do this presentation of that audit is going to be James Halloran. And we also have Michael McElliott from SDS here available, and I'll be able to answer any questions you have after his presentation.
Well, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
James Halloran with James Moore and Company. Happy to present your audit. I've always been your auditors, since you guys' inception. So we've kind of seen you grow over the years, about 5 years time frame. Big differences from where it was 5 years ago, But it's always nice to be involved in that process for a client. So a little bit about the audit. Your audit is your financial statements. Our responsibility as auditors is to audit those financial statements. You're subject to a number of regulations: U.S. auditing standards, government auditing standards, Florida Auditor General standards, and this year, you guys have been hoping for this for a couple years. Now, this is probably only exciting to us accountants in the room, but you finally hit the federal audit threshold of greater than $750,000 of federal awards expended in a year. So now you're also subject to federal single audit. We did have you see on the internal control and compliance reports. We did have one material weakness in internal control that related to the recording of grant revenue and grant receivables at year end. We recommended and management agreed that an additional $234,000 of receivables and revenue should be booked. The important is that is matching when you incur the expenses for your different projects, you have corresponding federal revenues that are paying for that. So without that, you currently had for the year about a $47,000 reduction in your fund balance, Without that, you would have had an additional $234,000 loss, which didn't make sense when we just looked at it, because you're typically not at that level. We had no comments related to the Florida Auditor General reports and the items they have us look at there. And then we're also required to look at Florida investment statutes and look at those, compare them to your policies and say, is there anything that's not in compliance with those Florida investment statutes? And we had no items required to be reported. As I mentioned before, first year, you're subject to federal single audit, also sometimes referred to as uniform guidance. You had about $851,000 in federal awards for the year, all in the Natural Estuary Program. Congratulations, we had no findings related to single audit, which is rare. A lot of entities, the first time they go through a federal single audit, will have findings related to the compliance of those grants and internal controls over those grant components. So congratulations, no findings there. With the federal single audit, you'll also see now in the report is a schedule of finding and question costs, which lists out the various different audit reports and where findings are shown. And there's also a corrective action plan related to the one material weakness that we discussed before. Financial health, I always get asked about this by entities, and the Florida Auditor General requires us to do a financial condition assessment, and it compares the district to itself, the council over a 5-year period, which you guys have just been in existence 5 years, as well as to other comparable entities in the state. And you guys come out what's called inconclusive or average. So the only time it would be a concern is if you were unfavorable overall. We then would have to look a little further and provide recommendations on improvements of how to get your financial health up. So some changes for this year. As I mentioned before, your general fund balance, which is you have just one fund, general fund, decreased about $47,000. No change in your member contributions. That's about $1.5 million. You get some money from the water management districts, as well as each one of you from your counties contribute as well. Federal grants saw a nice increase, which is why you were subject to federal single audit of about $275,000. The license plate, especially license plate monies, fluctuates each year, down just a little bit, just $3,000 down for this year. And those are restricted, can only be used for those specified purposes. You have a balance left in there of about $392,000. Overall increase in your total expenditures of about $776,000. You got $264,000 were grant-related expenditures, and then strategic projects was another $463,000. So that shows you're getting out there, getting those projects accomplished, which is what the goal is of the IRL Council. So at year end, you sit with about $1.6 million of unassigned fund balance. So the question is, well, what is that really in relation to IRL Council? How does that fall out? And if you look at it in comparison to your 2020 expenditures, you're about 64%, which is almost right about 8 months. And if you look at it, compare it to your 2021 budget, you're right about 71%. So it's relatively close on both. Probably one thing is, as Daniel probably can attest to, and Michael, is you have a cash flow where anytime you deal with federal grants, you're laying out the cash first, and then you have to wait for those reimbursements. So it might be something to look at in the future of establishing what you want your fund balance policy to be, or working capital type policy to determine, okay, how much cash do we actually need to make sure we always have in order to handle that float, the difference between when you request the funds, you got to pay the vendor right away, but you're going to wait a little bit from the federal government for those monies. So some important note disclosures, you do work with your Brevard County health insurance, so you record other post-employment benefit, very small at this part in time because you really only have 3 employees, so still very minor at $2,000. The FRS net pension liability, that's through the Florida retirement system, that's a typo on there, should be $555,000, up from $368,000 in the prior year. You will know, as all you in counties, FRS went up in July 1st. General employees, about 1.5% of wages went up for general employees. They're right about 10%. And that kind of follow along the other classes as well, from anywhere from 1% to 2% increase in what you're paying into Florida retirement system. And that is all I have, but as always, I'll take any questions or comments, or if you want to stump the auditor, I'm always up for that too.
Okay, who wants to stump the auditor? No comments? No questions? Then council is going to look for a motion to accept the audit report.
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion on the floor to accept the audit report by Commissioner Adams, seconded by Commissioner Zadowski. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Okay, we adopted the agenda earlier, didn't we? Number 9? Yes, okay. Item number 10, presentations. Brevard County Save Our Indian River Lagoon Council Program, Virginia Barker. And Dr. DeVries, you're going to introduce the speaker?
Yes, I'm going to be brief on this. Last meeting, we had a little discussion about what was going on in Brevard County with their half-cent sales tax, generating right now over $30 million a year for 10 years. And I thought it was a really good time to bring Virginia Barker, who is directing that program and the Director of Natural Resources, to give you all kind of a look at what that big program is doing within Brevard with that half cent. It's really not just remarkable, but when I look around the country and I talk to other National Estuary Program directors about what local communities are doing within those NEPs, I have not yet heard of a county putting that level of resource dedicated to estuary restoration. And so they've got a few years under their belt, a lot of projects moving forward. Virginia and I literally talk weekly, as I do with many of the county staff, but I thought it was a great time to bring her up so you can see, you know, what having a cash flow will do to a restoration effort.
While she's coming up, we'd like to have St. Lucie County be your stepdaughter. We could use a few bucks.
Thank you.
Yes, welcome, Ms. Barker.
Thank you to the council and the staff for bringing me here today, and for all that you do for the lagoon and all that you do in your roles. I know you're all very busy people, and it's great that you've taken on the lagoon as an extra duty and assignment. And I also want to thank the program for the grant writing service. We've found that to be very helpful in the past in being able to leverage lots of other state and federal funds. So I wanted to put a plug in for that before I got started. I was asked to come here today and talk a little bit about our experience with this half-cent sales tax for our Save Our Indian River Lagoon program. So in a nutshell, the tax was passed in order to have a dedicated fund to trying to restore a healthy lagoon. And we have a plan. That plan is centered around 4 R's. You're familiar with R's, but we have 4 of them. So reducing the excess pollutants that are still coming into the lagoon. And of course, those are coming from multiple sources, principally fertilizer and wastewater and septic and stormwater. Then we, unlike some communities, have a large challenge with removing accumulations of excess nutrients that are now stored and fluxing out of muck deposits. And so we're doing that with environmental dredging. We've added an extra step called interstitial treatment, which I'll talk about in a moment. And more recently, we've also started harvesting vegetation out of our stormwater ponds and canals to try to remove more nutrients upstream before they get to the lagoon. We have a small restore piece that is principally oyster bars and living shorelines, planting shorelines. We've added clams this year. We have a section actually written by the Water Management District staff for us on seagrass restoration. The problem with that is we've got to have good enough water quality for that seagrass to take hold and survive. Otherwise, we're just putting more nutrients in the lagoon. So we haven't gotten seagrass restoration underway yet. And then we also have a small piece, which is what I really want to speak most about today, is our respond section. And so we are measuring the performance of projects as we're implementing them. We are updating those costs. We're using the cost and benefit data to evaluate cost effectiveness. And each year we do a recruitment for new projects, new technologies, new opportunities. We compare those new options to what's already in the plan, And where they're better than what's in the plan, the worst project in the plan goes out and the new project comes in. And so we call it respond, so it starts with an R, but it's really adaptive management and continuous improvement. So quickly, in terms of project delivery, we've got a map here from the North County line to the South County line, MIMS to MICO, completed projects in both the Indian River Lagoon and the Banana River. They're a good distribution of all the different types of projects in our reduce, remove, and restore categories. So 43 completed projects. We have 66 projects that are currently underway. We have another 100 that are in design. 112 of those are partner projects, mostly municipality projects, but also NGOs. We're contracting with, whoever in the community can bring these projects forward the fastest. We have 170 individual contracts with homeowners for upgrading their septic tanks, another 63 with people who are on sewer that have leaky laterals. The 19 quick connects, these are people who are located close enough to an existing sewer line. They're not required by state rule to connect, but it's close enough that it's pretty feasible and they're willing to do so. So we're funding those projects. And then we have at least 10 different performance contracts going on to measure how well these projects are working. So the ever popular, unfortunately, topic of sewage overflows. When we approved our plan, the original plan in 2016, and adopted this tax, we did not address this topic. Then Hurricane Irma hit in 2017, 20 million gallons of raw sewage overflowed in Brevard County, and this was something we had to tackle. And so the top graphic is why these sewage overflows happen. We have leaks in the pipes. Normally, those pipes are sitting in dry soil, but when you have a hurricane, when you have a major storm event, the groundwater level rises above those pipes. The pipes are partially empty, so the hydrostatic pressure means that all that groundwater is trying to force its way into the pipes. That collection system becomes overwhelmed, and you have overflows of excess volume. Well, we ask the question, wait a minute. So when the groundwater drops back down and these pipes are above the groundwater level, they're still cracked. What's keeping the sewage from leaking out? And the utilities folks said, oh, it's the hydrostatic pressure pushing in. You don't need to worry about sewage leaking out. But we convinced, we did smoke testing in a pilot community in Satellite Beach. We convinced 8 homeowners to let us go sample the groundwater in their yards near where leaks were found. From the smoke testing, 7 out of 8 showed indications of sewage leaking out into the groundwater. So we've now added that component to provide homeowner grants we're doing the smoke testing, and then when we find the folks that have those leaky laterals, we have a homeowner grant program to get those leaks repaired. So we're looking forward to that, reducing the overflows during storms, but probably even more importantly in terms of nutrient loading, it's repairing the leaks so sewage isn't leaking out year round. So moving to septic systems, before we got started in this, my understanding was that the concern was failing septic. And you go online to EPA and you Google some information and they say, maybe 10 to 13% of septic are failing. And we've had ongoing debate at the state level. Do we enforce inspections or not enforce inspections? But the way that a naturally functioning septic system works is you get about 10% nitrogen reduction in the tank, another 30% maybe in the drain field, and the rest of that nitrogen is going into the groundwater. So depending on how far that tank and drain field are from the water and what the groundwater pathway is, a good portion of that loading is making its way to the lagoon. So we built on some work actually done by Martin County to estimate the loading from different tanks based on distance. And we quickly realized that the systems closest to the water were loading the majority of nutrients. And so this was just based on 3 different distance classes. The total loading there for septic in Brevard to the Indian River Lagoon is about 400,000 pounds per year. 300,000 of that, right, 3/4 of that comes from these systems that are 50 meters from an open water connection to the lagoon. But then we also know that soils make a huge difference. Sandy soils, the water just goes right through carrying those nutrients. And so when you look at the conductivity of different soil types, the soils, we have 8,000 septic systems that are in highly conductive sandy soils within 50 meters of a water connection to the lagoon. And so that 200,000, so half of the load, goes with those 8,000 tanks. And then when we look at those even smaller distance classes, we can whittle down to 5,500 out of our 53,000 septic systems that are responsible for 48% of the load. So our plan targets those 10% of the worst tanks that are responsible for nearly half of the loading. So all of that conversation was about nitrogen because the wisdom out there was that the phosphorus is going to bind to the soils and it's not going to make its way to the lagoon. It won't be a problem. So this is 2.5 years of data from 45 groundwater wells that we put in different communities up and down the county. So the green line represents natural communities. We went to several of the parks and preserves and sanctuaries and put in several wells in each of those up and down the county. The purple is sewer, so you see the sewer communities have slightly elevated phosphate levels. That may or may not be leaky sewer. It could be fertilizer, it could be pet waste, it could be washing the car, it could be all the other things that happen when we clear the natural vegetation and we move there and we generate bits of pollution. The next line up is sewer communities that also receive reclaimed water. So you see, a little bit more orthophosphorus in those groundwater samples. But then the red is the septic community. And so you see a very striking increase. So this is not phosphorus that is stuck to the soils. This is phosphorus that's loose in the groundwater that is migrating to the lagoon. And what's really disturbing here is towards the last 10 months, and you look back to when did it start, March of 2020, those phosphorus levels have just been going up and up and up and up every single month. Well, what happened in March of 2020? We all got sent home. And so people who had previously been going to work at an office that was probably on sewer are now at home all day cooking and eating and generating waste that's going into their septic system. So we'll be interested to see how this changes as our economy goes back to or gets to a new normal. So back to the nitrogen story, if we take that 2.5-year record and just add it up, average it for each community. So the green bar is our natural control. You see very low levels of nitrogen. The blue bar is the sewer, so somewhat elevated, but still quite a bit lower than septic systems. So yes, septic systems are loading nitrogen as well. But then what we learned here is the signature of these sewer systems that are on reclaimed. So we spend millions of dollars to convert communities from septic to sewer, and then if we return that treated water back to them to use for irrigation in the form of reclaimed water, and it's still high in nutrients, we're just returning the nitrogen right back to where it started. So we have multiple projects upgrading our wastewater treatment plants to reduce the nitrogen in the water before it is returned for irrigation purposes. This is one of the first projects that we did after the sales tax started coming in. So we have a park called Long Point Park. It has an old package plant. The package plant does secondary treatment and then discharges to a lagoon, which infiltrates the waste into the groundwater, right? Standard secondary wastewater treatment. So what we did was we went around that lagoon and we trenched, and then we backfilled that trench with denitrification media. We put wells in, between the pond and our trench and beyond our trench. We are seeing 98 to 99% reduction in nitrates and nitrites going through that wall. And so our next phase is we want to add aeration to the pond so that we convert more of the ammonia to nitrates, and then our denitrification wall will remove those nitrates. We're currently getting about 60% total nitrogen reduction, but we think if we can work on those different forms of nitrogen, we can improve that performance. So we have these prioritized septic systems. We know which septic systems are the most important ones to do something about. Sometimes they're in nice little clusters at a reasonable distance to existing sewer, and we can convert them to sewer. A lot of the times there's one here and there's one half a mile that way, or the wastewater treatment plant is at capacity, or for some other reason, connecting them to sewer, central sewer is not realistic. So we have a fund for replacing people's conventional septic with advanced septic, which increases that nitrogen reduction from an average of 35% to at least 65%. Those advanced septic systems have lots of bells and whistles. They have pumps. They're like mini package plants with batch processors. They move the waste from an oxic cell to an anoxic cell and back and forth a few times. The power goes out, the pump dies. Whatever happens, you're right back to a conventional septic. The Department of DEP has been working with the health department to try to develop an alternative called in-ground nitrogen-reducing bioreactors. So that same denitrification media that we've had great success with in our Long Point Park, the idea is to put that media underneath the drain field so that it's reducing nitrogen under the drain field before it gets to the groundwater. So we've worked with the Department of Health to negotiate an MOA that allows us to install these systems. We're putting in pan lysimeters above and below the media and wells downstream of the drain field to document that these things really do perform at the 65% reduction that's required for advanced septic, and if we are, which the state is particularly interested in for their spring sheds. So we've installed 6 of these, and we've let the contract for the well installation. We're about to start the monitoring data collection, but I don't have any of that yet. So muck prioritization. We knew there was muck out there, but we really didn't know how much muck. We didn't know all the places that it was. Fortunately, the legislature funded a pretty extensive effort by Florida Tech with the funding passed through the county to document and measure and map where is the muck, and then determine, is all muck the same? And it's not. Some muck has a lot more nutrients. Flux is a lot more nutrients. It's a lot fluffier. It moves around more. Not all muck is equal. And so based on that data, we have reprioritized where we are dredging, what are the most important sites to dredge. And we're working on, with Dr. Gary Zarillo, on a model to help us understand how much of that muck do we really need to remove to sort of reestablish a cleaner baseline. So the work of Dr. John Treffry, if we just leave the muck there, it will take 100 to 200 years to dissipate on its own. If we don't want to wait that long, we got to dredge it. How much of it do we need to dredge? Because obviously dredging is expensive. So this is data. This is from the Water Management District's monthly grab samples, just downstream of the first dredging project that we did near the mouth of Turkey Creek. This station is like half a mile away from the dredging project. So the first section of blue monthly data, that's measures of turbidity collected before the dredging occurred. Then the orange is during dredging. We dredged and we thought we were done, and then a hurricane came and it washed more muck in the hole, so we re-dredged. So there's a pretty long window of dredging there, but there was community concern that dredging was going to stir things up and make it worse. So this is a wonderful indication to me that no, the turbidity, right, the clarity of the water did not change at all during dredging compared to pre-dredging. And then the blue on at the end of the graph shows the after dredging conditions. So we now have over 2 years of data that shows that the turbidity is 30% lower post-dredging than pre-dredging. Oyster restoration. There was a lot of concern that, if oysters were gone, they were gone for a reason. Why did we think they were going to grow? We had been working with Brevard Zoo for multiple years before the half-cent sales tax passed, gardening oysters in small little cages hung from people's docks. So they're up in oxygenated water where you would expect them to do well, and they did. So the question was, are they going to do well when we stick them on the bottom, where there might not be enough oxygen and other issues? There's no predator control, other sorts of issues. So University of Central Florida has been doing this third-party monitoring for us. Each of these pairs of bars represents how many live oysters did we put there to begin with, and then the second bar is how many oysters are there at the most recent monitoring event. And so you see in most cases, the number of live oysters has basically doubled since initial installation. The exception are the first 2 sites on the graph, and those are both in canals. All the rest are in open water. Those are on canals. So we're not doing any more canal projects. We're continuing to study these to see what we can learn, see if there's something else we can do about those sites. But we're using this data to adaptively manage to select the best projects going forward. So I've talked about our 4 Rs. These fold up into the ERLNEP's 10 Rs, which all fold up into the 32 vital signs. We're all working on different pieces of the puzzle, but we will get there together. One of the joys of having this tax is that we have this dedicated fund, and we can plan things long range, and we have enough time to collect the data, learn something, recalibrate, pick newer, better projects, improve our tools. So definitely having that dedicated source, and it also allows you to plan and move forward with projects that take large planning horizons, which a lot of the grants have such short time frames that it's just very difficult to ever do large projects or projects that require a lot of pre-planning. So I want to close by talking about, in addition to implementing projects, we need to think about another R, which is regulation. And so the county adopted one of the first fertilizer ordinances in our area. It's the more stringent ordinance. We also, a couple years ago, added the retail signage requirement that some of the other counties along the lagoon adopted before us. That was a great idea. We adopted a moratorium on the land application of biosolids, like our neighbor in Indian River County. The cities are now implementing language similar to what the county has about mandatory sewer connections. Lateral line maintenance as we go and do more smoke testing, and we just let a contract a couple weeks ago to smoke test another 25,000 homes. As we find those broken laterals, people are mandated to connect. So we're gonna have the carrot, we have this grant, if you connect in 6 months, repair in 6 months, but we also have the stick, and if you don't, we're gonna come after you, and here's the code enforcement process. In our first year, we connected about 200 homes from septic to sewer, and we were very pleased about that. And then we found out at the same time that due to tremendous growth and development in the county, the Department of Health had permitted 800 new septic systems. So the county, with all that information we had about which areas were most important, were most impactful, were posing the greatest risk to water quality in the lagoon, we generated an overlay map, and everybody developing in that overlay map area has to use advanced septic, not conventional septic. Stormwater, we've done a few tweaks requiring higher standards in some critical areas. We're also looking at redevelopment. The statewide stormwater rule is also underway per Senator Mayfield's Senate Bill 712 from last year. That committee is looking at numerous ways to improve the stormwater regulations statewide. Some of that includes low-impact development. I know some municipalities have adopted low-impact ordinances. The county is going through their code, looking at what facilitates low impact and what doesn't, and what we could do to change that. We're also looking at climate change resilience, especially now that the state is pushing that, and funding should be coming down the road for that. Shoreline protection buffers, we've adopted, this is coming Tuesday, an incentive program for people to, if they want to do more development in the buffer, we'll allow that if they go above and beyond our stormwater requirements by 20%. Water conservation, also incredibly important, not just because we're wasting potable water on irrigation, but all that excess irrigation is either running off or it's soaking in and pushing groundwater, which we know is full of nutrients, to the lagoon faster. So we think there's a lot of gains to be had with water conservation. Plastic and litter is coming up more frequently locally, especially as we have more studies in the lagoon documenting microplastics in different critters. And so, regardless of how severe that problem is now, if we continue doing what we've been doing, it's only going to get worse in the future. And so some preemptive measures may avoid what could become a similar crisis down the road if we don't take action early. So with that, I just want to close it. It's wonderful to be working with all of you. We're all in this together as one community, and it's great to speak with one voice.
Great, thank you. That was a very interesting update. Does anybody have some questions?
Just a quick comment. I want to commend the county that Virginia mentioned the lateral lines on the homeowner side, and I again want to commend the county for going above and beyond the regulatory framework of our the department's permit with their systems and their collection systems, and them going further and essentially addressing these private lateral lines, because it is a big impact to the overall utility collection system. So it's phenomenal work for you guys to go that direction, and I think it might be a model in the state, maybe the first that I've heard of, and I want to commend you guys for addressing those private lateral lines, because we know that they're an issue, and you guys are stepping up, so thanks.
Great. Jack?
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Virginia, would you share that information with our water quality folks? Is that something you would do, or is that just?
And any of it, it's all public record. I'm happy to share whatever you want.
Okay, all right.
Yes.
Because
anything that will help.
Well, I think that each of our counties have been provided ARS money or ASR money, whatever it is. Can't keep them all, but septic systems, these types of things are part of the first 5 things that you can actually invest in with these dollars. And I think would like to have your checkbook, but we'll go for the other one that we know we can attach to. So great job. I'm so impressed. So.
Phenomenal. Jackie?
Thank you, Chair. Amazing work. Thank you so much for all of your work. I wanted to ask you 2 things. You talked about a wall. Mm-hmm. I didn't understand that. Could you kind of just re-talk about how that functions? For some reason, I totally couldn't understand that.
So this is a treatment technique that has been used in agriculture for ages. They call it a mulch trench. Yep. And so You know, just picture if you want nutrients that are in the groundwater on your site to not leave your site, this is a treatment that can be done around the perimeter. And so you're digging down into the groundwater. The groundwater that is moving is typically moving fastest near the surface of the groundwater, at least where I am. And so you want that groundwater to pass through something that is going to reduce the nutrients. So it's basically digging a trench and backfilling that trench with media that will have the phosphorus attached to it, which has a lifespan. But the denitrification is actually done by microbes. So as long as, in the case of agriculture, the mulch stays saturated, it doesn't break down. It just provides the right home for those microbes that are turning the nitrogen pollution into nitrogen gas and leaving the groundwater.
Relatively simple.
Yes.
And very effective.
Yeah. So it's a
That's
matter
great.
of, you know, looking at what's working in other fields and figuring out how to take that same concept and apply it to our challenges here.
Virginia, you're doing such good work. How would you describe the reaction of your taxpayers, of your people in your county?
You know, there's some that are here that follow what's going on, and they're very complimentary. There are a great many who don't follow what's going on and assume that nothing is happening. So much of what we're doing is underground. It's invisible. It's at the other end of the county. They don't see it. You can't advertise on, you know, well, you can advertise on television or a newspaper, but that's not how people are getting their information anymore. They're getting their information from all these different places in social media. So it's very challenging to get the word out to people as to what is taking place. So there is a large sentiment that, you know, we're collecting all this money and nothing is happening. The lagoon, obviously, we're still seeing blooms. We had some not terribly large, but still disturbing fish kills at Thanksgiving and Christmas, like Chuck mentioned, with those blooms. And so that's what they see, and that's the headlines they see are the water quality, the ongoing water quality problems. They think that as soon as they pass a tax, somebody can flip a switch and the pollution will go away.
Right.
Yeah,
well,
the
thank you
sentiment is
so
difficult.
much, and you really are an example for the state. And I think your work inspires, and hopefully we'll just keep going because our state leaders, it's amazing what you have been able to do. And thank you so much.
Well, we
And-
need to take lessons from your social media presence and help get the word out better.
Well,
She does
you're
have a good one.
doing wonderful things, and I want to say, the more I learn that everything starts in the state legislature. You know what I mean? And like seeing the things that they're supporting now that just a few years ago I would have never guessed in a million years. You know, you have hope, and you're like, wow, you know, times are changing, and so I have hope.
Good. Doug?
Yeah, I've said this, or had this conversation with Dwayne before, but in 1992, I was in the Florida Keys, and the South Florida Water Management District did a study on the Big Pine septic tanks. You know this, and
I live there.
Yeah, I was there lobstering, and I had a dismal day of lobstering, and I was cleaning the boat, and I looked down in the canal behind the house, and there was a sea of tentacles right underneath the boat in the coral rock. And I went, aha. Went down and got my limit within seconds and walked up to the house, a hero. But there was a Key West citizen saying the results were in from the dye study that the district did and putting the dyes in the toilets of the homes of Big Pine Key. And it was 47 minutes from flush to canal that everything arrived intact. And from that 1992 on, I've had a different opinion of septic tanks in my life. I just bought a house in Stewart, and the first thing I did on Riverside Drive was hook up after that study in '92. But what I want to get around to saying is I think my county, Indian River County, and all counties should have a dedicated fund to take advantage of cost share funding. St. John's has a huge cost share funding program for ag and for urban. I just think that some way we need to be able to parlay county money with cost share funding. If there's a way that the county commissioners here can look at that possibility, there is cost share funding, and to have a dedicated amount of money to double it or triple it if possible. Just a thought.
Right. We've done extremely well leveraging these dollars with grants, and I didn't quantify that, but yes, knowing that you're going to have the money, and you're going to have the money every single year, and regardless of what the timing is on the grant, you can meet that timing. You're going to have your match when the grant needs you to have the match. Makes a huge difference.
Great. Commissioner Brower.
Yeah, I'm just going to piggyback on it. First, your report's excellent. It's great to hear that there's progress being made. When he just mentioned the Big Pine, was it Big Pine?
Yeah.
I've gotten lots through there
showered
too.
really hard that day.
Never in the canal, but septic systems obviously don't work where there's a high water table, and I don't think we need to hardly debate that. However, I'm wondering, and I heard just in your report that 48% of the nitrogen was coming from septic systems.
No.
From 10%.
Yeah, 48% was coming from 10%, sorry, let me try to say that again. Yeah, so of the 400,000 pounds of nitrogen per year that is going to the Indian River Lagoon and Brevard County from septic, right? There are lots of other sources of loading, but septic is responsible for about 400 pounds. Half of that, 48%, is coming from just 10% of those septic systems.
Wow. How do we arrive at that number? Is it an educated assumption because of how close they are, or how?
So we started with a spreadsheet model tool that was developed for Martin County. And then, and I believe St. Lucie has also used the same tool. We then used the state's ARC inlet model to model the loading from half of our septic, from 25,000 septic tanks distributed around the county, to sort of validate that simplified spreadsheet tool that we had used initially.
Okay, so.
And now we've been sampling these groundwater wells to validate that the models are correct. One of the limitations of the state's model is that it is strictly for nitrogen. It doesn't tell you anything about phosphorus, because the belief was that the phosphorus was going to bind to the soils and it wasn't going to migrate off-site. What we're seeing is it definitely does. And the reason that we suspected that was that we had collected data up the tributaries, grab samples up the tributaries. If you go for 3 weeks with no rain in the dry season, and you go collect a grab sample, the phosphorus levels are still very, very high. Well, that's not stormwater runoff. There hadn't been any stormwater runoff, and the creek is constantly, going by. So that's new water coming into the creek from groundwater. So what is polluting our groundwater? It's septic.
Okay, here's my question, and I'm going to end up with an appeal to spend some money on some testing. And this is not a criticism, it's a question. I want to make sure that we're working on the right things, because just that one thing, septic tanks, we're looking at trillions of dollars to convert everybody. Has there been soil testing in the drain fields to show how much nitrogen and phosphorus is coming out from the laterals in a drain field?
So the groundwater well data graphs that I presented Some of that data is from sites that are on septic. And we placed those wells as close as we could to the drain fields based on site access. And, you know, some people have pools and there's sidewalks and, you know, there are trees. There's places you can get to and places you can't get to for putting in well. So we have that data. And then for the in-ground nitrogen reducing bioreactor sort of, you know, pilot for an alternative advanced system, we're going to have these pan lysimeters that are catching the water coming out of the drain field pipes before it goes through the media, and then after it goes through the media, and then groundwater wells downstream between that drain field and the connection to the lagoon.
Okay, that's excellent. Here's my concern that has come up pretty recently. In Volusia, there's a lot of discussion about, in my county, there's a lot of discussion about forced sewer, Deltona, Ormond by the Sea. And so before I was ever elected, I do soil testing for a living and a lot of other things, and agriculture related. So I had people asking me, do we know how much nitrogen is coming from this? I said, I don't know, so let's test them. So I actually did, not a lot, I did 10 tests for homes in Ormond by the Sea, which is a beachside community. It's very sandy soils. So I assumed what I heard today, that the leachate was going to come through there and go right into the groundwater. When I did the test, I did a control test in the middle of a yard, and then I located laterals through core sampling. Did test in the soil just 6 inches below the laterals. In the center of the yard, and this is what I've seen for 35 years in soil testing, that the pounds of nitrogen per acre are 80 to 90 in any yard that I've ever tested in Volusia County. The tests that I did underneath the septic tank were 4 pounds of nitrogen per acre. The highest one that I got was 42, and it was a brand new septic and drain field. It was about 3 months old. And so in investigating, what I learned was what you already said with the mulch, and that if you can get the water to pass through that, the microbes will consume that. And it looks like, through my test, and research has kind of led me to believe this, that underneath those laterals there is a collection of anaerobic and aerobic bacteria, fungus, soil microbes that are there like foxes in a field full of rabbits. They're feeding on that, and they gather around those laterals, and they're consuming it, and it's not going into the groundwater. So I would like to see some soil testing to see if there's any accuracy in that, so that we know we're spending the money in the right place.
That's a great example. So yes, we have seen some similar data, and we've done soil testing like that on for the land application of biosolids. Data I didn't present here is nitrogen isotope data. So you can, we see that denitrification occurring near drain fields, near that Long Point Park lagoon, you know, any source of, steady source of nitrogen that's going to constantly feed those microbes and keep a big healthy population of microbes doing denitrification. So what you find left over is the heavy nitrogen that the microbes don't like, and you see that signature of the nitrogen isotope heavy to light nitrogen ratio changing through space as those microbes are using the nitrogen they like best and leaving the nitrogen they like least. But yeah, that's, you know, what you described, that's exactly what's happening, why you're seeing lower amounts per acre or whatever under the drain field where you have that good microbe population versus, you know, far afield where the nitrogen source isn't frequent enough or constant enough to have that big microbial population.
And I think what you were mentioning about the groundwater, the difference between what you would expect in the soil versus the groundwater, and why it's important to test what's actually been, you know, dissolved and is transported.
Is on the move.
On the move
Yeah.
and already out
And, you know,
of the
maybe
soil.
that gets there when the sprinklers are on too, and the waste trickles by, you know, faster than the microbes can handle, and you know, that gets in the groundwater and moves, whereas the stuff that is up in the soils gets mostly treated.
Great.
Thank you.
Commissioner Smith.
Thank you for being here today. I knew you were coming. We passed this Brevard County passed this in November of 16, correct?
Yes.
So our first collections were in January of 17. So that means we've had 17, 18, 19, and 20. We thought at the origination that we were going to probably collect around $30 million a year. What did we wind up collecting?
Right, we were conservative on purpose, but we projected 32 million a year. What we're actually collecting is about 48 million a year.
Right. I just wanted to get that out there because.
Yeah.
Well, and that leads me to my point. You said you'd like to have our checkbook. You can get it because I don't think there's a county in this state that's more conservative than Brevard County. We're the only county that has a charter, which means that our budget is capped at 3% or CPI, whichever is less. So you don't spend money in Brevard County because people aren't going to let you, period. So that's where Virginia came up with this idea, and former Commissioner Jim Barfield and myself were the ones that grabbed it and said, you know, maybe we can sell this. And we did. We went out to, I can't tell you how many town hall meetings that we addressed people. Like, you know, sometimes there'd be 15, and sometimes there'd be 3, and sometimes there'd be 50. But we did it, all up and down the county. And we didn't pitch that we were in favor of it. What we were doing was we were telling everybody, this is an informational meeting. We want you to know the pros and cons, and you decide whether you want to do it in November or not. It's your choice. We have an opportunity here to do it or not do it. So it's your call. And the vote was like 70%, 67%, something like that. So you can have that checkbook. You just have to get another couple of your commissioners together and say, listen, this is something we're going to do, and go out and do it. And I'd be surprised if it didn't pass. You were talking about the carrot and the stick on the laterals. We came up with the stick because when we introduced this whole thing with laterals, we volunteered to pay for it. Now, if you were told you had a leaky lateral and it would cost you nothing to get it fixed, wouldn't you go out and get it fixed? Well, guess what we found out? Awful lot of people didn't bother. So then we came up with the stick.
Almost no one.
Yeah. So then we came up with the stick, and I said, I don't remember what we came up with, but I was pretty harsh. But it worked. Everybody's doing it.
Was it 3,003? Was it that motion?
Was that?
$3,003?
Yes.
It was the. There was a lot of negotiation on what the fine would be.
Yeah. And, but the last thing I wanted to say, and this might embarrass Virginia, but you can raise a lot of money, but you have to find your own Virginia Parker. Because she's made it work.
Yeah, you're doing amazing work, and thank you so much for that great presentation. Our next presentation is going to be an update on the GeoCollaborate Harmful Algae Bloom Innovation Project funded by FDEP. And Dr. DeFries, would you like to introduce that?
Yes, and I have to share this. I'm sitting here watching Virginia in like one of those old guy proud moments, because I met Virginia first when she was a student at Duke University.
Oh, wow.
And then her and her husband, Dr. Mark Bush, who's at Florida Institute of Technology, moved down some, I forget how many years it was, and Virginia calls me up, and I'm like going, wow, it's funny, you know, how life moves. And so my next introduction is somewhat similar to that. And so I'm going to take a little of your thunder, Dave. I'll let you do the formal introduction, but as you all know, we got a very substantial, over $963,000 grant from the Florida DEP Innovation and Technology. We are partnering with St. Johns River, Harbor Branch Oceanographic. Chuck Jacoby is going to be working with South Florida on the data sets. And so I wanted to bring the team down because we are now under contract. Our subcontract is let. And I thought I'd just tell you how this whole project happened, because it's almost like what happened in Brevard County. You have a good idea, but you know, if you just think about it, it's a dream. And if you act on it, it becomes reality. And some of these, what I call blue sky dreams that the former chairman of Disney, a good friend and mentor of mine, told me, you know, they can happen. So anyway, Ellen Prager, Dr. Ellen Prager, who's part of the team, she and I have been working together, is it over 20 years? Maybe 25 years as co-chairs of the Florida Ocean Alliance. We have talked almost every year when we meet, and we only meet occasionally. Gosh, wouldn't it be really cool to have a project together? Because Ellen is one of those Jacques Cousteau kind of scientists. And Dave will mention some of it when he does the formal introduction. You know, she's written dozens and dozens of books. You know, if we have a earthquake or a tsunami somewhere, anywhere in the world, she's on CNN and Fox News and MSNBC. I mean, you know, she's the go-to. But she called me up, what, 2 years ago? And said, gosh, I'm now involved with this company, and I want to just tell you what we're doing. And I have to tell you, you know, I am not an IT computer person. I didn't actually understand anything she was doing, other than it sounded really cool and interesting and had possibilities. And so she and Dave got together and actually did a GeoCollaborate instance with me that showed me what it could do, which led to let's do a proposal, which led to, you know, let's get a team together and put this proposal in, and now we're sitting on over $963,000. But if you get a chance to read one of her books, I'm going to embarrass her. This is my favorite, actually. It's called Sex, Drugs, and Sea Slime. And so she takes science and brings it to K-12 STEM education and the general public in a way that the general public, and you'll see this today, understands. So I'm going to just introduce Dave and Ellen. And this is the beginning of a project that will last 18 months. We've been working really hard. Dan, you know, worked through the DEP contracting. That's let. The subcontract is let. We're just about ready to move as soon as they're ready with Harbor Branch. But the good news is we have just hired, as of 24 hours ago, the IT specialist who is going to assist us with this project. And we're really excited about this hire. We had, how many, Kathy, applicants? Was it 80? Something. It was like 80 applicants. We interviewed 7. The last interview we went, oh my gosh, that's the one. And this individual had other offers, full-time offers, and came to this project because of the innovation they're about to show you. So Dave, we're going to turn it over to you.
Well, good morning. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I thought what I would do is give the title of the project is Integrating HAB Data Across Platforms and Establishing a Virtual HAB Information Center. So I'll dive into that a little bit, but I'd first and foremost like to thank Florida DEP for believing in this technology, for seeing this opportunity, for Ellen and Dwayne to get together and talk about what the possibilities are, and of course for the IRL board for allowing us to move forward with this technology. A little bit about myself, just as a little background. I'm the founder and CEO of Storm Center Communications. I spent about 10 years in the 1990s on TV in Washington, D.C. As an on-air broadcast meteorologist. Before that, I worked for a computer weather graphics company, so I would travel to TV stations around the country and train broadcast meteorologists how to use computers and how to use their systems to forecast the weather. I'm also the co-chair of a group called the ESIP, Earth Science Information Partners Disaster Lifecycle Cluster. So we spend a lot of time looking at data, making sure data is trustworthy, how it's collected, how it's stored, how it's delivered, making sure it can drive decision-making. So we really focus on data-driven decision-making. And I'm also an invited member of NOAA's, it's called EEOOTT, Environmental or Extreme Events Ocean Observing Task Team. So NOAA is getting a lot of their experts together in ocean observations and really trying to put together cohesive stories to senior management as to why they should fund more ocean observing systems so we can improve forecasts of hurricane intensity, hurricane track, and things like that. So I'm a member of that group, and it was great. We were nominated and selected as the ESIP Partner of the Year in 2020 for trying to leverage more science data into decision-making environments. And so that first picture, when I was at NBC in Washington, I was asked to do the Today Show a couple times. You notice I had a little bit more hair at that time, so it's changed since then. And so I'd like to invite Dr. Prager to tell a little bit about herself, because she's a lot more animated and interesting.
No, not at all. But first I want to thank all of you for this opportunity, and of course thank Dwayne for that lovely introduction, which we really have been trying to figure out what could we do together. We were both so passionate about science, about public communication, and getting decision makers the data they need. And I just want to assure you that I have had some traditional science jobs in the past. I actually was a researcher for the U.S. Geological Survey, and I worked at Florida Bay for many years. I was the assistant dean at the University of Miami's Rosenstiel School of Marine Atmospheric Science. I also was the chair of the Ocean Research and Resources Advisory Panel for all the federal agencies that work in oceans. But I discovered my real passion is, how do we bring science to a broader public and make it accurate, keep it credible, make it relevant to their lives, which I know is so important to all of you, and as you've seen, make it a little entertaining. And so since then, I've had some really great jobs. I kind of call them my adventures in marine science. I am the science advisor for Celebrity Cruise Lines in the Galapagos Islands. Oh, it's horrible. I have to go to the Galapagos several times a year. I was the chief scientist for the Aquarius Undersea Lab in the Keys for a couple of years, did 2 missions living underwater. Probably my claim to fame with the under 15-year-olds, I was a consultant on the movie Moana, which I have to say was a ball. And I spend time writing popular science and middle grade books, adventure books that integrate science, because I fully believe we need to find ways to bring science to the public in all different areas, in all different ways, so we can reach the people outside the choir. We're really good about talking to the people who are interested in science and love nature, but some of those other people, not so much. And that is one of the reasons I was really excited about GeoCollaborate, because not only can it integrate data, science data from different sources, I think it's also a new way to bring data to the public. And so I'm going to turn it back over to Dave.
Sad to hear you can't hold a job.
Yeah.
That's right.
Either that or I just don't like authority.
That's great. So Dr. Prager is also Storm Center's chief scientist. So it's always great to get an entertaining view of things. So I'd like to describe to you very quickly about how briefings, when you have data and information, are done. And this is typically in the federal government, but I've seen it in other areas too, where when somebody has to brief you on a situation, many times they go through different tabs on a web browser. right? And they'll show you different maps, different things. Oh, this site has great information. This one has great information. This particular one over here just collected this data. And so what GeoCollaborate does is it pulls together trusted data from those sites and puts it all into a map environment. So we're actually able to be on the same map at the same time, looking at the same data. And the nice thing about GeoCollaborate is it's collaborative. So that means that I can connect with all of you in an instant and start to move your map around and display data from different locations. So it's been described as sort of like Zoom, but for GIS data. Somebody has described it as the Apple of GIS because we try to make it very easy to work with and to understand. So from a user interface standpoint, this is what it looks like. You have a leader that logs in with credentials, and they can go and get data services from any portal or any hub or any data source, and then share that in real time with followers, so they're following in real time. Just the other day, I was asked in a NASA meeting, NASA aeronautics meeting on wildfires, to do a live demo, and I did that, and they had over 500 people on YouTube, and they all connected from different places around the world, and we're seeing the map move around. So that was really, really exciting, particularly for them who have never seen it. And then you have a dashboard, which people can keep up on their computer, and when data sets update, they just update on the dashboard. So what we're really trying to do, and is what Ellen said as well, is we're trying to take science information, and in this project, take it in a way that the public can eventually understand. So, you know, what is dissolved oxygen? Well, so they could maybe find out about what it is easier and see those values when we go through the whole process of, you know, checking the data, making sure it's accurate, making sure it's served in a way that people can understand and access. But the combination of the leader-follower and the dashboard makes for a very robust virtual situational awareness center. And that's what we're talking about with GeoCollaborate. Excuse me. From a 10,000-foot standpoint, this is kind of how it works. You have trusted data that's out there on the internet and from other servers that people are offering. And you can have any device connect through a URL. They just type in a web address, and when they connect, there's an on-off switch for GeoCollaborate. You can turn it on and turn it off. Once you turn it on, you're synced with the leader. And any of these platforms, mobile device, tablet, laptop, supercomputer with a web browser, all of a sudden everybody's connected on the same map at the same time. And so how did this come about? I'm not sure if you are familiar with a program that the federal government has called SBIR. It's called Small Business Innovation Research. So we proposed, believe it or not, back in 2010, we answered a grand challenge that NASA had. NASA was looking for ways to access, how do federal agencies improve the access and sharing of their data? And so we went through all sorts of tests. We created a Google Earth environment where you could collaborate, but you had to install our software on your computer. So after 4 years of testing weekly collaboration sessions and everyone saying, we love the way that this, you know, you can share your data and our data and all that stuff, but we have one problem. We have to install your software on our computer. And back in 2010 and 2011, we were like, so you have to install every piece of software on a computer. And they said, emerging security IT requirements within the federal government are going to get harder and harder and harder as time goes on. But they said, if you could do this on the web, you'd really have something. And so we went back to the drawing board and proposed under the SBIR program. So essentially, the SBIR is the U.S.'s $4 billion seed fund for innovative technologies. And if you go through a phase 1 and develop a prototype, then the government does a deep dive on your technology to look and make sure no one else is doing it in the country. If they find other people doing it, they don't fund you for phase 2 because it's not unique. And unique in the federal government means new invention. And so they came back and said, not only is the technology unique, it's profoundly valuable to the federal government. So they immediately funded us for phase 2 to develop the technology. So we developed it, and after 2 years, they said, we want to extend this contract, because it's a contract with the federal government, to extend your collaboration capability to all mobile devices. So they funded us to do that. Then NOAA offered us, or issued us a contract, a phase 3 contract. So when you get when a small business gets an SBIR phase 3 contract, it means that you're sole source with every federal agency in the U.S. government. So that means anyone in defense, intelligence, civil sectors can immediately contract with you to roll out this technology, to integrate it into their mapping platforms, to expand it. And so we're really happy to be a phase 3 small business where we can now accept contracts from the federal government without further competition, with no set ceiling and no set time frame. So it's really a great position to be in. And that's part of what the proposal was to Florida DEP, to leverage this federal investment of over $1 million to leverage that and see how we can apply it in the Indian River Lagoon. So we're also funded by NOAA under a program to address wildfires and smoke, and also river ice and flooding, their initiative called River Ice and Flooding. So we're working with groups like the Weather Service up in Alaska to monitor river flooding when the ice breaks up. When you have the ice river freeze, when it breaks up, it can create ice jams, and that could create major flooding in certain areas. So we're using NOAA satellite data to identify areas around the country where flooding is occurring. And so this is one example of how the Weather Service is now using GeoCollaborate to brief emergency operations centers and states during real-time exercises. So they had this one just a couple months ago with the state of Rhode Island, and the Emergency Operations Center and the water treatment facility folks in Rhode Island. Their first question back to the Weather Service is, when are you going to implement this? So it was really exciting to hear that, and the Weather Service said, well, we're just kind of introducing you to a way to deliver this data. What do you think? And they said, when do we start? So we're really excited about that approach. This is one where we're also working with the Hurricane Research Division in Miami. HRD are the folks that you might know of as the hurricane hunters. They're the ones that fly the P3s and the Gulfstream 4 around the environment of the hurricane to gather enough information so they can improve hurricane forecasting. Well, one thing they can't do is they cannot share data from the airplanes to the other airplanes. And they can't share data from the airplanes down to the ground in a real-time way so more scientists can have their eyes on that data. And so one of the ways they're going to use GeoCollaborate, and have used it with Hurricane Laura, actually, was the first time before it made landfall in Louisiana last year, was the P3 was in the air flying, and the scientists on the ground were looking at data and said, we see, because of the proximity to the land and how they have to fly, and they can't fly over land because it's much more turbulent, they redirected the plane using GeoCollaborate. So they were on the ground and said, here's a new flight pattern, and that's what you see in this graphic, the leader and the follower, and then down the bottom is a Zoom session with the director of the Hurricane Research Division and one of the meteorologists saying, here's what we want the new flight pattern to be, and it turned into the official flight pattern for the P3. So that is incredibly exciting because we think GeoCollaborate is going to help advance hurricane intensity forecasts in such a way that they've never had before, simply by putting people on the same map at the same time, looking at the same data. So I'm going to ask Ellen to talk about this one a little bit.
So when Dwayne and I started talking about GeoCollaborate, one of the things we very early on recognized was, just like some of the other areas Dave has told you about, there are a lot of disparate types of data being collected, being created about harmful algal blooms in the Indian River Lagoon. We've got model results, you've got monitoring data, you've got laboratory analyses, and being able to bring those all together in a collaborative way could be very beneficial. And as we started talking about it, we also started thinking about the other people working in the area, and so Thankfully, we brought on Dennis Hanasak, who's here in the back. There's Dennis from Harbor Branch. And of course, Chuck came on board. And we started thinking about all of the benefits that GeoCollaborate could bring by integrating these disparate forms of data across platforms and doing two things: creating a collaborative environment, and then also, eventually, a public-facing dashboard. And so these are just some of the things that we came up with, things like enhancing tracking and monitoring. I love, Chuck is working on probability forecasting. Oh my God, how exciting would that be if we could bring that to the table once it's ready? Increasing the effectiveness of communications and making sure that we have clear and consistent messages to the public. So these, I think other things are going to develop as we progress, but these were some of the things that we proposed to DEP. Once we have shown how this works in the Indian River Lagoon, we're also excited because we think the technology is scalable to other sites that are susceptible in Florida to harmful algal blooms. And so the second part, of the latter part of the grant, is to create what we're calling a demonstration of a virtual HAB information center. So that will be later, sort of once we've done a proof of concept here in Indian River Lagoon, we're going to show how it could be used on a wider scale, not only regional, but it could also be used on other issues. And with that now, for a little excitement, I'm going to turn it back over to Dave, and we're going to do a quick demo of how this actually works.
So I just want to show you that since GeoCollaborate is actually operational in certain areas, I wanted to show you an example. And I'm going to get out of, let me see if I can click on this link here. Yeah, I'll just hit escape and go down here to the web browser. So up on your screen is the follower of GeoCollaborate. And I've actually turned it on. You see the on-off switch here. You can click it and turn it off, and click it and turn it on. And on my laptop here, this is just a separate laptop connected to the Wi-Fi in the room. I have the lead. And so I'm going to put my glasses on, which is always a good step before you do any demo. And I'm going to zoom down into the southeast. So on my computer, as I zoom down into the southeast, let me make sure I'm connected here, then you will follow me. And so that system is responding to my zooming in as a leader. And so I'm going to check and make sure that the, there we go. I'm reconnecting to the, I think I got disconnected from the Wi-Fi, which of course it always happens.
Well, and while Dave is getting that up and running, one of the beautiful things is you guys could be connected through this URL. You could be on your cell phone, you could be on a tablet, you could be out in the field at the same time. So it doesn't have to be right here on the same system. And that is one of the parts with the SPIR that they came up with. You can do it on mobile devices. And you can use any platform. So you don't have to be on a PC. You don't have to be using Esri specifically. You can do this across platforms. It just integrates into the system. The other point I want to make while Dave is doing this is that one of the important parts about GeoCollaborate is that it leverages existing portals and websites. One of the things is that we recognize that the state agencies and a lot of organizations have invested a lot in portals and websites of data. We're not going to replace those portals. We're going to actually have them be better used because GeoCollaborate will pull data from those portals as a trusted source. And so we always like to say it sort of turbocharges those portals. It's not replacing them. It's allowing people to actually get data from the portals easier.
That's right. And so now I'm going to change the base map here to a satellite base map. And so as I move around here on the leader, the follower on this other tab is following in real time. And it looks like my computer did disconnect from the Wi-Fi, so I'll just use this computer. So as I'm leading, I just want to get a data set. And I'm going to turn a data set on, which is like let's say the marine observations. So as I turn the marine observations on, what you see are real-time buoys and observation platforms in the ocean that are taking data right now. And while this is not screen sharing, it's real-time geospatial data sharing. So we're actually sending that data into everyone's devices, and they can interact with it. So if you click on a buoy, you'll see a data, when the data is there, the data is real-time. So this data is being collected by this buoy and is available. And from a standpoint of, let's say, sea surface temperature data, we're working with NASA very closely, and this data set that I'm going to turn on here is a high-resolution sea surface temperature data set. 1 kilometer sea surface temperature produced today from NASA JPL in Pasadena, California. So they have their robust servers. They're putting this high-res sea surface temperature product together and staging it on their server for GeoCollaborate to grab and share across any platform. So as we talk about this science data and we start diving in closer on Indian River Lagoon and starting maybe to use some of the satellite imagery that Chuck was showing earlier, bringing it into a real-time collaborative environment, all of a sudden we're connecting all these decision makers together. And the vision, as we described in the future, is to have a dashboard that perhaps the public can look at and see where there's harmful algal blooms, and then say, oh, I'm not going to go here today, but I'll go here. We want them to spend their money in the blue economy and not leave the Indian River, but maybe it'll be a little safer to go over here. So they've never had that kind of information at their fingertips before, and that's what we're really excited about. And the last data set that I want to show here, I'll turn off the sea surface temperature one and just turn on a weather satellite image. So this satellite image is less than 15 minutes old. I'll turn off the ocean observations. And just for those of you who haven't looked out the window, we're starting to, perhaps clear up a little bit. And there's some clouds around. So you see all these clouds that are inland. There's some clearing happening off the coast and all that stuff. This satellite image is taken from the NOAA satellite, 22,300 miles up, orbiting over the equator in 75 degrees west, taking images every 5 minutes. And so we'll be able to bring that data right into GeoCollaborate and show people the impacts maybe that weather's having, or harmful algal bloom data. So I'm going to end there. I appreciate your time, and we're really excited, Dwayne, to be working with the Indian River Lagoon Council and to have Ellen on board, and Chuck and Dennis. And so we're very excited about bringing science data to decision makers and also to the public at some point.
Thank you. It's amazing what technology can do working together. Does anybody have any questions? Wonderful. Thank you for the oh, Jackie, go ahead.
Thank you very much, both of you. Super interesting and wonderful to think about getting information to the public. Was the public also part of the informational, like the public could plug in algae blooms that they saw, or are you just pulling from the agencies?
So that's a great question. So any sort of data collection platform that could be set up, say through an app or through connecting to a website, the public would be able to submit pictures or reports or things like that. So we could harness the power of crowdsourcing to improve situational awareness and things like that. Currently, we have some other projects that are asking if they can do that sort of thing, like up in Alaska. It's so rural up there. They want to have people to take pictures of the ice in the river. And so they just won a grant from a NASA GLOBE program where they're going to be sending that data into the GLOBE database. And we may be able to tap into that so we can really get citizen reports up quickly.
That's great. How do you deal with the ethereal nature of the algae blooms? I guess it's a lot like clouds, but so there's blooms on the lake today, but tomorrow they might not be visual. How do you, if people would actually be using it to decide where to recreate, how does that match in real time?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that's through the series of the project as it evolves, we're going to see how useful certain satellite imagery is, certain reports are. That's why we have Chuck, on board, so we can really leverage his expertise, and also the Indian River Lagoon Council and their new hire that they just made is also a GIS expert. So we're going to want to process that data and test it out. And see.
Yeah, and I just want to add, one of the things about, like, if we have a dashboard, and if there's monitoring data, it will automatically update. So,
Okay.
right, so if we have the monitoring data and it's set up as a service, that dashboard will automatically update. So hopefully that will resolve the issue of, is it there, is it not there, and how quickly is it changing?
Super. Thanks.
Great, thank you so much for the presentation.
Thank you.
And Madam Chair, if I could really quickly, because I know we're running out of time, the way this is going to stage out over the next 18 months, we expect and hope that you all will be involved in what Dave calls the instance, so like the Zoom meetings. So task one is going to be getting everything ready, QA/QCing, a lot of heavy load, with Dennis at Harbor Branch and Chuck with the Water Management District data. And then once we have that in place, the first formal instance, which will be like an event, we could have 300 people, or 50, and we're going to extend invitations out, will be kind of the hindcast, what I would call, the technical look of the data that we have. The second task the second instance is actually going to be almost like an emergency response drill. But Jackie, to your question, we are already thinking, could we put somebody out on the lagoon with a camera, where you may not have a lot of data sets, but just demonstrate the ability of citizen science to upload on top of the science, where you could zoom down and say, well, what does it look like right off our dock over here, where somebody's real time just taking a photo of a bloom. And so, as much as I hate to say it, we're pretty confident we're going to see algal blooms this summer. And then when we move to that tail end, and we talked about it in the slideshow, it's actually demonstrating this at a statewide level, pulling in the Lake O cyano bloom data, over on the West Coast, and doing an instance that is very much kind of the statewide communication platform. So we're going to look at you all as council board members to participate in those instances, but also if you have staff, start thinking about who you want in the room for that, because my staff will be reaching out to you, and this intuitively you think, well, let's just get the scientists who do harmful algal blooms, but this may be a demonstration that's super valuable for your emergency management folks, because this is not limited to any data set that's specific. I could see using this in our program long-term to look at projects where Virginia's projects are integrated with our projects and all your county projects in real time. We do a quarterly meeting and say what projects are underway. So I wanted to get, pique your interest and your curiosity, because this is very much going to be a iterative process, and we want you involved as board members and staff that you think need to be there.
Thank you, Dwayne. And we're going to move on to item number 11. We're going to try to click along pretty quickly the rest of the agenda here so we can get you out on time. Old business, we have the update strategy for financing the CCMP report.
Okay, really quickly, I had hoped to bring that final document to you for adoption today. We're making some changes, recommendations from EPA as part of the certification process, and so we will be bringing that document in August. So we're still tweaking that document, and so sometime between now and August we'll have a final for you to look at and consider adoption in August.
Okay, great. And item number B, amendment to the service contract with Integrity Arts and Technology.
So we've brought this contract to you guys before 3 times. This is now the 3rd time for amendment, and this was one of our very first service contracts that we put together. So it was originally structured kind of as a not to exceed amount based on their competitive procurement, As the council has matured throughout the 5 years, our service contracts have changed to more of a work order / task assignment basis, where they propose services, or actually we ask for services that we need based on their competitive procurement, and then we issue task assignment. So what we're asking to do is to amend this contract to kind of update it to the current format that we have with our other service contracts. And I'll answer any questions if you have regarding this contract.
Anybody have any questions?
Madam Chair, I'd be happy to move approval.
Okay, great. We have a motion on the floor by Commissioner Adams.
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Brower. And all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Motion passes unanimously. Okay, moving on to item number 12, new business, the independent audit services.
All right, so this is a question for you, the council here. Our contract that we had with James Moore is at an end. They're originally procured for a 5-year service term. Built into that contract was a renewal option, and the other option is to go back to competitive procurement. I have, and staff has no opinion on this matter. It is up to the council to decide what they refer. The management board did decide, as you heard earlier from Kathy LaMartina, to go with option 2, and that's the only thing I have to offer regarding that aspect.
Okay, we have some discussion from the board.
Madam Chair, I would like to commend our auditor for their information and keeping on top of things for the last 5 years. But having said that, I think it would be prudent on our part if we at least researched what some other auditors might have to offer, just for a change-up. That would be my thinking.
Madam Chair, I would just concur, just simply to say that when you do have an auditor who's been there from the beginning, they have that longevity, that you know, institutional knowledge of where we've been, where we're headed, and so on, which also I think is helpful. And quite frankly, the fact that they know us as well as they do, I think they'd be very competitive in the process. So I think that having it go out for an RFP is important.
So you're saying having to go out for an RFP? Okay.
I just think that they'll compete well simply because they know us so well and where we're going. And so.
Great.
I would concur. I think for transparency's sake, it's always good to put out an RFP from time to time. I think our current auditor, as Commissioner Sebastian indicated, would compete well in that, and we are doing our due diligence by making sure that we're keeping this going. Plus, I think if the management board, quite frankly, has discussed this and are recommending that, then it's been vetted, and I'm fully supportive. So I would be happy to make a motion to authorize staff to develop and advertise a competitive RFP for independent audit services with a term of 5 years.
Okay, I'm sorry, is that Commissioner Smith that seconded? Okay. So we have a motion on the floor by Commissioner Adams, seconded by Commissioner Smith. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? A motion carries unanimously. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And we would issue that RFP immediately so that they could get on board for the next fiscal year.
I'm sorry, could you say that one more time?
We would issue that RFP immediately.
And then that would come back to us in August
Yeah, we'll be back in August with recommendations based on that RFP. That way, we've got time to do the early briefings, you know, end of October, we would start that audit process again.
Okay, great. Thank you. Item B, the fiscal year 2022 final budget adoption.
All right, so back in February, we issued our tentative budget. Per special district guidelines, we have to have our final budget in on June 1st. In your meeting package, there was just the adoption for the resolution. There are a few small changes between the tentative and the final budget, specifically in other expenditures that was reconciled to all the proposals that were awarded back in February. We also added an additional line item that you're going to see later in the agenda for that economic cost share proposal to Ray. And to account for that, we had to make some reductions in administrative costs. We took $5,000 from printing, $5,000 from travel, and then we shifted some money around in administrative services. We reduced IT services by $20,000, but had to add, anticipating that we will be triggering that single audit based on the cost schedule provided by James Moore, a $5,800 increase in audit. And once we actually get that RFP in and see what that cost proposal will be, we'll amend that budget accordingly. So there is no change in revenue, no change in total expenditures, just some line item readjustments. And I'll take any questions if you have regarding the budget.
Okay, does anybody have any questions on the budget? No. Okay, and we need a motion to adopt?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor by Commissioner Zadowski, seconded by Commissioner Adams. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you so much. And now we have item number C, EPA work plan modification, EPA mandatory travel funds.
All right. So in all of our work plans, EPA mandates a minimum $10,000 travel line item for our work plans, and this is to go to the technical conferences with the National Estuary Programs and EPA, both in the spring and in the fall. This current year, those have all been canceled due to the pandemic, so I spoke with EPA and said, you know, because this is mandatory, is there anything we can do about it? And they said, because we're in a pandemic, we can reallocate those funds as long as they go through the management conference. With the potential for algal blooms, we are suggesting that we take that $10,000 and put it towards our harmful algal bloom monitoring contracts so that they can do some additional sampling as needed beyond the biweekly sampling that they do now.
I think that is a fantastic idea.
Yeah, me too.
I would be happy to move approval.
Great, thank you. We have a motion by Commissioner Adams,
I'll second.
seconded by Commissioner Brower, and all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. I think it's a wonderful idea. Okay, item number D, 2021 Small Grants Program Proposal Scores and Funding.
All right, so last Thursday, the CAC met to discuss the final rankings of the small grants that came in. There were 17 proposals total. 3 of them, as you can see in your package, were all green. They ranked up in the funding. The 3 that were in yellow initially were all tied. So we asked the CAC to kind of, you know, discuss how they want to fund those, because no matter what, one of them was only going to get partial funding. So the CAC decided that they looked at all of those and they felt that the Jones Pier didn't meet their criteria at that point, so they only wanted to fund the top 5. During the management conference meetings during the week, they were suggesting to fund all 3, and I'll let Dwayne kind of touch on this concept.
Yeah, in the past, council has always kind of had a philosophical position, and that is if we have enough money, you know, every project is progress. You know, let's fund as many as we can that were ranked in the money. In this case, and this is a slight adjustment we'll make with the CAC, Kathy had offered, and Dan during that meeting, to have the CAC re-rank that tie. Because even though in the meeting there was a discussion about, you know, is this really an education and or, you know, community restoration project? And the answer is not exactly, but that wet table that's proposed is going to support education and possible restoration. And so, you know, the staff's position on this is, you know, number one, we've already funded, you know, portions of this project in our large RFP. When the CAC decided not to re-rank the numerical rank, then it becomes somewhat arbitrary, you know, saying, well, we're just going to fund the top 2, but we're not going to fund the 3rd one that's ranked exactly like the top 2. So staff's recommendation here is, you know, we're not looking at a lot of money. We believe this is a valuable project and has been for quite some time. And our recommendation is go ahead and add that to the funded list, and those 3 last projects, since they were ranked equally, let's fund all 3 and add that project into the funding decision.
Okay. We have some discussion by the board.
Madam Chair, not a question per se, it's just simply to add a comment in that, you know, we've been in these situations before where we get really close, and our whole goal has always been to get as many projects and things in place as possible. And when you're talking about a wet lab, and I'm not an expert, but you know, when you're doing the science and you're creating the process by which you're gathering information in the education side, it's a tool, and I think you said that as well, but it's a tool to make things work that much better. So if we have the money in reserves, or if there's a funding source identified, I truly believe, since we've already invested in the front half of this thing, that we go forward and invest in this very, very small amount of money. But that's just my 2 cents.
Well, obviously, I will be completely honest. This is an Indian River County project, so I'm perhaps a bit biased. But I would concur with Commissioner Zavosky. We've done this in the past where our lovely volunteers that do the ranking, and they do a great job, and there's so many applications and information that comes into that. They make their recommendations to us, and if we have that extra money, we've reallocated it for different projects throughout the year. So I kind of see this, even though, again, I will be admitted that I am biased to this project, in line with some of our past decisions. And just for clarification for the board, I mean, this project in the wet lab and the educational building is intended to have elementary, high school, and middle school students come out and experience the restoration that's going on at Jones Pier, the whole project, and really to foster and develop our future scientists and our future lagoon advocates. So I think it falls in line, and it helps just kind of make the process a bit more transparent, where we have 3 that tied, so we're going to treat them all the same because we didn't go through that re-ranking or re-vetting process. So. But I say all that to admit that I love this project.
Yeah, I just want to add that, you know, the Citizens Committee is an incredible asset to us, and I just want to make sure that I recognize that the work that they do is absolutely imperative for the success of the NEP. So I do want to recognize them, and thank you for pointing that out. I was going to say something and I got off track, but yes, they are an incredible asset to what we do here. So thank you.
Yes, we do. Yes. Okay, so we have a motion by Commissioner Smith to fund all the projects, okay.
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Zadowski. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Okay. Authorization to submit letter of intent to the EPA, presented by Dr. DeFries.
Your previous decision on budget moved $25,000 into a line item for this proposal. What we're asking is authorization to submit a letter of intent. In fact, I'm already talking to Virginia Barker to see if I can, you know, convince them to come on board with us. If you remember, we did a full economic analysis. Actually, it was the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council back in 2016, and we served more as a technical support for that. And our approach is going to be to put a proposal in to update the economic analysis, bring as many partners to the table as we can, and then include some of the ecosystem services and set a standard, hopefully for the whole National Estuary Program, that this is the appropriate methodology to look at economic value in an estuary. So this will be competitive. I don't have any illusions about, you know, getting to the end on it, but submission will be in June should you decide to put that proposal through a first letter of intent.
Move approval.
Second.
Okay, motion by Commissioner Smith, Commissioner Doug Burning, seconded by Commissioner Adams, and all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Okay, with that motion, I'll be reaching out now to both regional planning councils and see if they, you know, that was their project. So if they want to own this, they can still own it. We'll partner, but we'll start reaching out. So if you know any other players out there that, you know, you think might be interested in this, let us know.
Okay, great. And with that, we are moving on to item number 13. We have staff reports, and our first report will be a communication report by Kathy Hill. Oh,
Or a project.
or a project update by Dan Kolodny.
Thanks. I'm just going to go through this as fast as I can for you all. So at the end of Q2 of this fiscal year, 44 CCMP projects or activities were in progress. 5 projects finished during Q2, and I'm going to just, you can see them all there on the screen. I'm going to kind of go through the first 3 just in short detail. So Riverside Conservancy's Riverside Restoration, University of Central Florida's Microplastics, Oysters in the IRL, and FIT's efficiency of adding highly concentrated dissolved oxygen. Volusia County did finish their Indian Harbor Estates project, the design and engineering for that, and Harbor Ranch finished their pilot scale demonstration of seagrass. So Riverside Restoration, this is up in Volusia County at Veterans Memorial Park. They empowered 5 young leaders to do restoration. They included 300 living feet of shoreline and 200 feet of oyster reef restoration enhancement. They also produced 5 videos, and I'm going to show you one real quick. 3 in Volusia County, 1 in Brevard County with the zoo, and 1 in Indian River County at that Jones Pier. Here's just some photos of the young leaders, those 5 individuals that got to participate in this. And the bottom photo is the Veterans Memorial Park planting that they did there. Next photo is kind of an aerial view of that Veterans Memorial, and you can see that white edge. That's all the oyster core modules, and you're going to see that in the video here in a second on what those are. So let me just go to, is it on here?
Riverside Conservancy is restoring a living shoreline at Veterans Memorial Park in Edgewater, Florida. Thanks to a grant from the Indian River Lagoon National Estuary Program, Riverside Conservancy has planted more than 300 feet of shoreline with native vegetation. Unlike a normal lawn, these plants are specially adapted to grow deep roots that help stabilize the shoreline. They can also absorb excess nutrients that run off the land during rainfalls, which promotes clean water in the Mosquito Lagoon. The IRL Council grant is also funding oyster reef enhancement along 200 feet of the intertidal waterline. And did you know that oysters filter up to 50 gallons of water a day and also provide storm surge protection for upland property? The Riverside Conservancy is using a technique called core oyster modules designed by the University of Florida to help reestablish a thriving oyster reef just offshore of the park. If you're in Central Florida, please stop by Veterans Park and check out our living shoreline. For more information, visit www.riversideconservancy.org or check us out on social media at riversideconservancy.org.
Great.
For the microplastics oyster in the IRL project, this was looking at microplastics and the ingestion rates in eastern oysters. They took water samples from 35 sites monthly and quarterly oyster samples from 12 reefs lagoon-wide. The results were 44% of water samples contained microplastics, with fibers being the highest type and white and blue being the highest of colors. 70% of all oysters collected contained microplastics, and 32% of the oysters could ingest all those microplastics in 2 hours if they were in clean water. FIT's project was to add highly concentrated oxygen to enhance performance of muck dredging projects. They looked to reduce total nitrogen and total phosphorus in dredge slurry by adding that dissolved oxygen. They did it at 2 different dredge material management area locations in Cocoa Beach. One was a small one and one was a larger one. They had limited results in the small one, 15% reduction in total dissolved nitrogen and 10% of total dissolved phosphorus. However, in the larger DMMA, they had a 61% reduction and a 72% reduction respectively. And I'll just show you some pictures of that. So the one on the left is the smaller cell, and that's at the end of Minuteman Causeway near the water treatment plant. And the larger cell is at one of the spoil islands in the canal area of Cocoa Beach. And you can see they have quite a little bit different design as well. And then here's just kind of what the system looked like. The water came in from the DMA through these little treatment cells, and that machine on the left there pumped in that highly dissolved oxygen, went through those 2 treatment cells back in the DMA for final polishing before being discharged into the lagoon. And that's all I have. Any questions?
Anybody have any questions?
Good job.
Okay. Great. And now, Kathy, we're going to move on to your communication report.
Yes. So I'm going to try to be brief as well. Socorro, which is the Southeast Ocean Observing Network, has a proposal out for education programs. So if anyone in your shops is doing any kind of curriculum development, there is about $8,500 available to assist with that. If you'd like the proposal or the RFP call, I can send that to you on email, so just email me or have somebody email me and I'll send that along. It's got a very short timeline though. I think the proposals are due by the end of the month, so time is getting short for that. Next, we have our annual report. There is a box of them on the end of the bench there, and there's a box in the back of the room. We brought plenty for all of you to share with your commissions and with your county managers, so we just ask that you at least give your county manager one. And we have more, so if you need more, just let us know. We're happy to get rid of them. Also, we have done, I showed you a short video last time. Actually, I have a couple of things to call out in the annual. So in the annual report, we have our regular roll-up of the annual funding. We also have continued this cumulative funding roll-up. So if that's of interest when you're sharing information with your constituents, that is in there, and we did them as little infographics, so they're real simple and easy to understand. So you can see over time in the 5 years that we have reported on, it's 117 projects completed, little over $8 million in IRL and EP funding with $17 million in partner match. So that shows a really good return on investment for those projects. So we have that. We have a couple of feature projects. Dan just talked about a couple of those. The microplastics project is in there as a full page with lots of art. The seagrass nursery down in Harbor Branch is in there as a full page, and there are several other ones as well. And that's just to show kind of the breadth of the programs that we have funded and what we do. And one thing that may help all of you to combat the public perception that nothing's being done to help the lagoon, we do a call every year because we do reporting to EPA about what our partners are doing in the watershed to improve the lagoon. We had about 260 partner projects come in this year. We were able to feature about 47 of them in the annual report. And that really is just for you all to be able to share with people that really there is stuff being done for the lagoon. They may not see it, and as Virginia said, a lot of it's invisible to them, but there's a lot being done. All right, so last time I was here, I showed you the little 30-second clip for the CCMP vital sign video. We have completed the 10R videos, so we have 10 one-minute videos that are coming online. Those will be pushed out on social media soon. I'm going to show you just one of those, just to give you the flavor for it.
Now really is the time for each one of us to start living lagoon friendly and becoming more aware that there are things we all do that damage the lagoon and harm water quality. Everyone has a role. Agencies, governments, homeowners, boaters, anglers, all of us who care about the health of our beautiful lagoon. Agencies and governments should prioritize effective stormwater and wastewater treatments that will reduce the nutrients and sediments that enter the lagoon and hurt water quality. Homeowners can do their part by reducing their use of fertilizers, pesticides, and other chemicals. Skip the lawn fertilizer during the summer rainy season, and when you fertilize in spring and fall, be sure to use products with slow-release nitrogen. Help reduce the amount of stormwater that runs off your property by redirecting downspouts to your lawn, or by installing rain barrels or a rain garden to contain runoff. Pick up after your pets and never dump anything into a storm drain or canal. Keep in mind that many of these drain directly to the lagoon. By adopting just a few lagoon-friendly practices, we all make a difference. So help us in restoring the lagoon. It's going to take more than just state agencies and local governments to solve the problem. every one of us can help, and we can make a difference.
Fantastic, yeah.
Thank you.
She has a future in television.
Yes.
Yeah, she's a rock star. She really is. She's great. I think she's in her mid-20s. Yeah, she speaks 7 languages, you know, she's just amazing, yeah. Yep, she's great. There is a male talent also, and you'll see him as well, but, but we really like her. We think she's great. So, yeah.
Are these available so that we can show them in our meetings, just to give our
Absolutely.
fellow commissioners an
Yep, that was my next point. We are going to make these available to anybody who wants them. So they're, you know, done, they're ready to go, and we can zip them to you as soon as your government TV stations want them. And if you know anybody in broadcast TV who might be interested in doing a PSA kind of thing with us, we'd be very happy to talk about that too.
Great.
Are they on social media too?
That's the plan. We're going to roll them out on social media, sort of. We don't want to have like a binge watching kind of thing go on. So we're going to roll them out one at a time. Every couple of weeks there'll be a new one, just to kind of keep the interest going. But as they come on and as they go out on social media, we'll share them, and then you can use them as well.
And are they also available on our website, or are they too big?
They will eventually live on the website, but not until the social media part of it's done.
Okay.
Yep. And that is it for me, so.
Great.
Thanks.
That was fantastic. We do such a great job with those videos. And our executive director report by Dr. Dwayne DeVries.
Well, I want to give a quick legislative update, and it's interesting. I'm actually getting emails from Washington, D.C. as I'm sitting here. And so first on the state level, another historic year, both in the governor's budget and House and Senate. And so, you know, once that gets through, you know, the governor's desk for signature, you will see, you know, really strong funding once again for Everglades restoration. We're super happy about that, you know, starting to continue. And I have already been working on the federal side, you know, passing the message that we'd like to see the feds fully fund at the amount that our congressional delegation is asking for. I think it was $725 million. There's a number of LBRs, legislative budget requests, some county, you know, and so we'll see where everything goes. But for us, the big news is that both House and Senate, you know, agreed to go ahead and transfer the Indian River Lagoon specialty license plate to us for administration. 2 people need to be thanked, because I was not up there walking the halls this session. But Adam Lovejoy at the Water Management District, you know, shepherded that through. You know, none of these bills are easy to get through, even the ones you think would be easy. And at the tail end of session, literally a week before adjournment, Senator Debbie Mayfield, the leader, had to step in a little bit to make sure that we had, you know, the House coming aboard with the Senate. And so if you see Senator Mayfield, thank her, you know, for having jumped in, you know, to make sure that happened. So what we'll do immediately once the bills are all signed is work with the Water Management District, make that transfer, and then sometime in the near future, you will get a chance, along with our whole management conference, to look at new artwork. We're going to use the management conference as a focus group, have 3 options coming from our ideas consultants, and then you all will get to pick one of those 3, which will move forward as a new license plate update. And our goal is to see if we can't double that revenue over the next couple of years, because it has been tapering for many years. On the federal side, I have a couple handouts for you. You'll see a House appropriation letter. We have 61 signatures, bipartisan support. And where we are with our request on appropriation is this. We were authorized back in January, actually 13th, the last set of bills to be signed by the former Congress, at $50 million, an increase from $26.5 million to $50. That was substantial. Getting a full appropriation as authorized is not an easy lift, especially when it's that big of a jump on percentage. And so the Association of National Estuary Programs is working along with all of the NEP directors to try to move that ball forward. And as we all spoke literally back in November, we've also kind of hedged our bet and said we want full appropriation as authorized, but if we can't get it, then at minimum of $1 million, which is where we were hoping. But if they go full amount, it would be about 1.4, which would double our 2022 federal revenue from EPA. So we will be pushing hard on that. Those of you who have lobbyists in Washington, if you're talking to them, tell them to give me a call, and I will be reaching out independently as well to just keep pushing that. I sent a letter to every House member in the state of Florida during the House letter, with that request, and so I've touched base with every Florida delegate. Also in your package is, back in April, when we knew there was going to be a, infrastructure stimulus bill, we submitted through ANEP a request for $10 million per national estuary program, $280 million, and $100 million for the competitive grants program should, a infrastructure bill be moved forward. And we made a case for why the NEP, is the place to at least look for some support for infrastructure programs. And so I wanted to share with you that was resubmitted just in the last few weeks to current leadership at the staff level, House and Senate, minority and majority staffers, and you have a copy of that piece. And then lastly, I wasn't going to share this right now, and I thought I really need to have you up to date on this. So you have a PowerPoint that I've been using kind of internally. When that first request came out, it was very much about COVID, reaction. COVID recovery was kind of not there. It was how do we respond to COVID? And so the call from Congress was, give us some projects that could help an impacted industry where you had some job numbers. And so you all know that our CCMP envisions 4 regional restoration centers. Our financial plan, doubled down on the effectiveness of those 4 centers to almost serve as regional hubs throughout the lagoon. Marine Discovery Center up in Volusia County, Harbor Branch Oceanographic, Florida Oceanographic Society, and in Brevard, a really innovative and big project. Brevard Zoo, who has been a major player in restoration, has proposed a new aquarium, still to be decided the location, but they're having conversations with Port Canaveral, but it would be an $84 million build. And so I institutionalized this vision with a little bit more detail, so I'm ready to go if in fact we see a play, and you know how this is going to work. We don't know how it's going to move. The House and the Senate are still way off on what they're seeing. In the Democratic and administrative, $1.9 trillion, the last I heard, is very different than the GOP is proposing, at least on the Senate side. But it's all really big money. Even at the lower side, it's really big money. So I want to make sure at least we're in play. I can't guarantee we will see money to the Indian River Lagoon National Estuary Program, but I'm doing everything I can to make sure our placement is right for those considerations. And you heard from Virginia, the reason I proposed this, we could have done a lot of projects, and the project starts, it gets done, you go to a next project. This is about building the infrastructure, bricks and mortar capacity to do restoration. And we are not where we need to be, especially on seagrasses, but if we have to do fish stock enhancement, building capacity is going to be a gift that gives for many, many years. 2021 priorities, I'm not going to go into any detail other than we are on track. COVID didn't slow us, and you see in the annual report, 2020 was a productive year. 2021 will be just as productive, and so I'm happy to say we are not losing any ground because of COVID, and in fact, we're doing more work than we anticipated. with a new contract with DEP. But when we come back in August, I do want to have a conversation with you all about looking ahead to 2022 and beyond. We had a beginning discussion, and we had it again today, about the power and the importance of education and community outreach. We are at that point now where your staff, we can't do any more work. We're at the max. So if we're going to do something new, we're going to have to stop doing something we're doing. And I'm going to bring basically a workforce analysis to you all with some recommendations, and also talk about, where we are. Are we heading in the right direction? Do we need to pivot a little bit? I think we're broadly in the right direction, but every August, it's always good to have that discussion with you all to make sure that you as investors feel like we're pointed not only in the right direction, but getting the job done. So we're going to spend a little time in August having that conversation. And then lastly, Laura Lee Thompson came in today to talk about horseshoe crabs. This issue came up in our Citizen Advisory Committee with a member recommendation that we ask you to consider writing a letter. And some of the issues were really around the Titusville Causeway. And I just wanted to show you some data that, we were talking about not all septic tanks being equal. Well, it's the same thing about natural habitats. And we did a screen capture, and thank you, Laura Lee, for getting me this copy. But if you look at that giant blue histogram, 2020 spring, that's the Parish Park south. So there's one little stretch of beach, on the Titusville Causeway on the south side. And look at the numbers of horseshoe crabs. It's not just important lagoon-wide. It's one of the most important nesting beaches for numbers probably in the state of Florida. And so this anticipation of maybe a letter and talking about this park development, the park on the north side is moving forward. There are accommodations. I talked to FWC yesterday for some nesting area, but it got me thinking to something I want to share with you, because sandy beaches is not on anybody's radar. Public access, I think, is going to dwindle as every one of these causeway projects elevate the roadway, expand the number of lanes, and then you've got this hard armament almost all the way down to the water edge. And so I wanted to share a photo with you of a project. And Aaron, you might actually remember this project. DEP was one of the partners. It's in the Panhandle. It was called Project Green Shores. And this project began back in 2003, where spoil islands, 8-acre spoil island salt marshes, weren't restored. They were created. And they were used as storm surge barriers for that roadway you can see, along the Panhandle. And this is, by Pensacola. You can see the oyster reef, the barrier island, or the barrier to, the first wave of a surge. And you see how, how that natural shoreline looks. So I called just in the last, month or two, our folks up in Panhandle and said, how did all that stuff handle the last couple of seasons of hurricanes? And the answer back was much better than the hard armoring. That natural, and we are seeing this across the board. NOAA has data on this. The Corps of Engineers has already published a paper about, a booklet about building with nature, and registered that building with nature with the Corps. And so what I want to do is just make sure we have a message out today and in the future, because you all know we have a habitat restoration plan in play. I will make sure horseshoe crabs and beaches are not left off that plan, but public access has to be something that we're thinking about from here on forward. Because with the population growing, with sea level rise, we're going to see hard armoring being an easy choice, but maybe not the best choice. And this is a perfect example. I mean, this is not new, emerging knowledge, but it's knowledge that just isn't getting down to the cities and our municipalities And even some of our engineering firms, you have a tendency to do business the way you did the last 20 years because it was easy to permit and it looked like it was working. So I just wanted to share that with you all, that we need to be part of that innovative thinking and move this ship to thinking about how we handle not just habitats, public access, but restoring critters like horseshoe crabs, because they are just as important, to the ecosystem as manatees. And Laura Lee reminded me, most of you know Laura Lee. She is, like our Marjorie Stoneman Douglas on the north end of the lagoon. But she said, remember how many eggs go out into the water column that are being eaten by spotted sea trout and fish. And so they are part of that food chain that's so important to maintaining, not just the ecological integrity, but the economic integrity of the system. So with that, I will just end to let you know if you have questions about kind of the vision. It's going to be a little while before we see congressional movement, I think, on this. The president's budget isn't even expected till the end of this month. But if you do have lobbyists, and have them give me a call so I can bring them up to speed, and I'll be reaching out as well. So, Madam Chair, that's all I have.
Madam Chair, along with that, using our lobbyists, I think I asked before, every time we do this, is a leave behind, talking points for them, and certainly getting a briefing from you is that much more helpful, but having a leave behind is also going to be important for them. So
that's one of the reasons I gave you the PowerPoint. I did not want to have a leave behind to your lobbyists where you haven't seen the leave behind.
Okay.
Appreciate that.
Thanks.
Yes, Jackie.
Thank you so much for what you just said, and I think that is just so crucial, especially because we all love Florida because it's Florida, so it's going to be a strange new world that we're entering, but we can keep places where we can still access the water, and the wildlife is something we can't give up. So I am happy to work with you through the South Florida Water Management District, and I've always thought, I was thinking more like mangroves, but I wasn't thinking about beaches until I talked to Adam Locke and others about how important that is for the wildlife and absolutely for the little birds, like running around on my gosh, everything's had such a tough time already. So it's key that we are leading the way on this, and you're just so good about remembering the things that others might forget.
Well, and thank you. I was down at South Florida Water Management District at Jackie's invitation to give a presentation to the governing board, and we actually saw that with the water level, management, and how wading birds and other birds in the Everglades were so profoundly impacted just by water levels. And so the little things really do matter.
Yes, absolutely.
And, Aaron, we're going to be looking to DEP to do that kind of project, means that we're going to need to think outside of the box in the permitting side of things.
Right, and just for everybody here, Dr. DeFries was a hero yesterday, speaking in front of the South Florida Water Management District, did a great job, and represented us very, very well. And it's all a new board. We're all a new board since 2019. So lots of learning that went on yesterday, and I know everybody was super impressed.
Well, thank you, and thanks for the opportunity. And by all means, those of you who are in, commissions or county councils, I've often spoken to St. Johns River, but I am available to talk to your full commission and council anytime you wish.
Great. Thank you, Dwayne. And we're going to move on to, does anybody else have any questions? Council member reports, and we will start with you, Doug.
No, I have nothing really great to report, but I've been boating a lot down in Martin County, and the water quality there is superb. Around the sandbars, and I've been fishing the river and out into the reef system just outside of the inlet, and the Fort Pierce Inlet looks better as well. So It's wonderful to see it. It really is wonderful to see the bottom and see, I saw a school of bonefish go by. And then I've seen people snorkeling all the way into the bridges going over to the old Indian River Plantation. In there snorkeling, the water was so pretty. So it's really wonderful to see. Anyway, that's the only thing I had to report.
Great. Commissioner Smith.
No report.
Commissioner Brower.
I'm going to make a report. I know we're hurting for time. There's two things that might require board motion for. I missed my opportunity at the beginning to add an amendment to the consent agenda, but it's important because I think it'll be important to Kathy. I think she could use some good, strong members on the Citizens Advisory Committee. And I have provided Dr. DeFries with a bio, a letter, a resume of a woman who happens to be from Edgewater that's really involved in the lagoon there, and I would like to nominate her to the CAC. So give me some direction. How can I do that at this point?
So Dr. DeFries, he can just make a motion to have that individual nominated?
No, that's great. We've reviewed when we first came in, and it's a strong addition to the CAC. We endorse it totally.
So if you would make a motion, then we can have that member then approved.
Okay, I'll make a motion to nominate Livianne Higbee to the Citizens Advisory Committee.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor by Commissioner Brower, seconded by Commissioner Zadowski. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously with, well, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 with Mr. Bernick absent. Okay.
Thank
Okay,
you.
go ahead.
I appreciate that. And one other thing, I'll skip with a lot of the things I have, but I would like one other action. We are hopeful that we'll have Dr. DeFries up in August to talk to our county council. And we are in the midst of a discussion, not at the county level so much. We're all pretty well agreed on living shorelines instead of hard armoring. The public's not completely, especially those that live on the coast, are not completely sold on it. So you'll be stepping into that, and you'll also be stepping into budget season. So budgeting for environmental needs are important, and I don't know if I can just request this of you, or again, if I need board action, but I would really love to have you write us a letter on the importance of protecting the environment, the coast, the lagoon, all of it. You know, it's all of our water. So can I just ask him to write a letter for us, or would you prefer a motion for that?
Do you need a motion for that?
I don't think for a broad letter
Is
supporting,
everybody-
what we've got on the, in the CCNP, it's something I do on a regular
Give
basis.
a head nod and agreement that we're
Okay.
supportive of, okay, writing a letter.
We're really looking forward to you coming in August, and unless you can come earlier, then we'll. And the other, we have a lot of different things going on. I'll just mention one real quick. Two, we are working with St. John's Water Management District and sampling water. This might be interesting to y'all. I don't know if you've heard about a buoy that's about this big. It's a handheld buoy called Gatorbite. That's has anybody heard? It's from a graduate student at the University of Florida, of course, with professors. And I've got information. I'll give it to you. It's actually a mobile buoy. It can be static, so it can be used a lot of different ways, but it was first created to be put in a stormwater drainage system and travel with the flow of water during a rain event, a storm event. And it collects data all along the way so that we could actually see if there's high points, hot points in that with nitrogen, chemicals, whatever. So it could, and it's, right now it looks like it'll be about $1,500 per buoy. So It's not cost prohibitive. I did bring some information. I'll pass some along to you and to anybody on the board that would like it. It's just another tool to help us look at water quality. And the last thing I'll mention is biosolids, because it was mentioned here. Our county staff is working hard to reduce the amount of biosolids that are produced from our wastewater treatment plants through both pressing and solarizing them. But it still leaves biosolids. So now we have concentrated biosolids that still have, you know, nutrients in it and whatever chemicals happen to be from it. So I am encouraging that department to also look at high temperature commercial composting of the biosolids, because even with a smaller amount, it's still going to end up down at Lake O being spread as fertilizer, and then it's going to come back up the river to all of us. So we have Mike Ulrich, who many of you may know, has already accepted that challenge, and he's gone through a seminar with one company that could provide that service. So I'm hopeful that might continue on, and we could actually convert biosolids to a compost product that would replace fertilizer. We're trying to, you know, it's a slow release source, but probably more importantly, in our sandy soil, it adds the bacteria, the fungus, and all the things you need to have a living soil and produce healthy crops. So lots of other things, but I'll skip for sake of time. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Adams.
Sure, just quickly, I am happy to report that after 4 years of work, the Roseland Septic to Sewer project is finally moving forward. That is a project that is partially funded with IRLNEP dollars. It is on the lagoon on the on the St. Sebastian River, lower income properties, very small lot sizes, so you have septic tanks next to wells, and it's just, we'll be moving forward with that. So very happy to see that happen. And then I just wanted to kind of follow up on a comment that Laura Lee had said earlier. We are actually going through a design phase right now for Spoil Island restoration project at the Lost Tree Islands cluster. So you're exactly right. You know, those Spoil Islands actually have habitat that is not Australian pines, and they can be a really vital part of water quality and ecosystem restoration. So hopefully I'll have some more exciting news about that as we move forward, but your comment was very timely.
Great, thank you. And for Martin County, I'll just say that the board last meeting discussed a letter of support to the Loxalucy, the Guardians, their initiative to purchase and protect that Bridge Road corridor in Hope Sound. Our board did discuss it about a month or so ago and unanimously voted not only to support their efforts, to even look at, you know, our that plan holistically in Martin County and try to look at funding mechanisms to support their efforts along with some other conservation efforts in Martin County. So thank you for that. You did issue the letter and we appreciate it, and our board also issued a letter, and we expect an item to come back again. And then on our septic to sewer projects, I've announced before that the board has prioritized removing 10,000 septic tanks in 10 years in Martin County, and we just broke ground in my district in Golden Gate, which is also an underserved area. We received $2 million in appropriations from the state last session, and we broke ground on that, and we expect to remove about, in that project alone, 770 septic tanks. So we're moving forward. We expect that when we receive our American Rescue Act funds, that we are going to dedicate a good portion of that to infrastructure and septic to sewer projects. So, and then many of you may have seen the governor was in Hope Sound on Monday, and we appreciate him being there. He gave an encouraging message to the public and to the Army Corps, encouraging them to manage the lake where it has, keeping in mind the benefits to human health and as well as the economic vitality of our area. In May, early May, the Army Corps presented, I think, the first round of what the 5 balanced schedule options. We feel that in Martin County, the 2 of them, 2 of the schedule more or less eliminate the discharges to the St. Lucie estuary while showing some improvement to the rest of the system. And those schedules are expected to be tentatively selected in July. So we look forward to that. And with that, that's my report. Moving on, Aaron.
I'll be quick. There's so much the department's been doing. I'll keep it short. Everything from Everglades restoration to preparing for sea level rise, implementing Senate Bill 712, 404. We're really busy, which is a good thing, and I think we're going to be continued successes. Other than that, thanks for the meeting. A lot of good information today. I got a full page of notes to digest and think about with all the good information that was shared. So thank you.
Great. Commissioner Zadowski.
Looks like we're finally going to move forward with our North Beach septic to sewer and North Beach on the Barrier Island septic to sewer and replace all of them. There will be no further septic tanks on the Barrier Island on the north side. And we actually are moving with an agreement with the city of Fort Pierce to ultimately remove the wastewater plant from the South Beach side right there at the inlet. That's a huge, huge lift. It's been something we've been working on for quite some time, and from a water quality standpoint, that's amazing. Now, we do have a concern now, and I'm not going to blame you, but it's the mooring field. They're all coming up to St. Lucie County, and they're mooring in the inlet, and they're dumping their waste in the lagoon. And so I'm going to probably call you about how do we, you, FWC, because they should require to come in. If they're going to come in and they're going to moor, they should be, pumped out. So that's a concern. We're having a lot of complaints from the community saying, hey, this is happening, and we just haven't been able to catch them in the act. So I'm not sure how we're going to be able to approach that, but your success in your mooring field is now is coming to us, in which we may have to come to you and ask, how'd you do your mooring field, and kind of work through that process. I know it was a challenge back in the day, but we are having so many vessels moored in the inlet. It's some of it's a navigational hazard, but more importantly, what we're seeing, the bacteria and some of the effluents coming out of the lagoon is scary. So.
Good. Okay, well, I'll bring that to our board's attention too.
Thanks.
As Stacy said, Governor DeSantis was here, and for the South Florida Water Management District Governing Board, it's just really amazing to have so much support from that level and a lot of money coming in, which is a gift. And locally, C23, C24 is moving forward. The reservoir, which is in St. Lucie County, they're in the design phase, but I mean, it is happening. There are things to work out, but it's exciting to see something that's been on the books since 2000, 2007 actually going ahead. And of course, that will hugely benefit the lagoon because all that water is just shot into the river uncleaned. LOSUM, as Stacy mentioned, the new lake regulation schedule is a big thing that's going through the district, and anybody talking to anyone in any level of government, I think moving the water south, protecting the estuaries, and protecting the lake. Unfortunately, we live in a system where one section does one and the other one gets creamed. But it's what a thing to have the Army Corps talking about balance. It's a great word, and that's what we should all be striving for. Algae, major problem, and you may have seen the pictures of Pahokee Marina, and something Mr. Torcivia said to me when I came in the room, oh wow, what a difference. The South Florida Water Management and DEP were over there cleaning up that awful situation instead of standing there watching it, which has basically been the way it's been handled in the future. The only catch is, how are we going to clean it all up, and how are we going to pay for it all? Something really positive to end on is that, like I was saying earlier, one entity gets creamed and the other has a banner year. Well, the birds of the Florida Everglades are having a banner year. They think it's perhaps the second best since 1940. And so with the rains that happened last year, like Dwayne was talking about, just a little bit of different levels in the water, on the sand, you know, they're having babies, and there was a flock of ibis that they documented, 6,000 birds, a rookery, 6,000 birds. I mean, that is comparable to the days of Marjorie Stoneman Douglas. So there is hope. And it is exciting that we are all part of this turning ship. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Jackie. And indeed, what a great note to end on. And I just wanted to remind council members, if you have an advisory appointment, to go ahead and get those to staff and their bios so that we can confirm those on the August meeting. And our upcoming meeting will be August 13th, 2021, and that will be here. And with that, we are adjourned.
Great, thank you.